This is Bible Stories for Sleep. For thousands of years, the stories of Scripture have been a place of refuge, a sanctuary for the weary mind. Tonight that sanctuary opens through Paul and Silas in prison. If you find rest here, a quick subscribe helps us keep these stories coming. Now set aside what you are carrying, trust that tomorrow is in good hands, and let your mind grow still. The sun, a benevolent orb in the cerulean sky, cast long, shimmering pathways across the Aegean Sea as the small vessel cut through the gentle waves, its single sail billowing with the promise of distant shores. A soft, salty breeze, carrying the faint scent of cypress and olive groves from the lands left behind, ruffled the dark hair of the men on deck. Among them stood Paul, his gaze fixed on the horizon, a quiet intensity in his eyes that spoke of a journey far grander than mere travel. Beside him, Silas, his steadfast companion, leaned against the mast, the rhythmic creak of the timber a familiar lullaby against the vast expanse of the open water. Their journey had begun in Ansh, a sprawling city of diverse tongues and bustling markets, but a profound vision had redirected their course, a dream that had etched itself into Paul's very soul. In that nocturnal visitation, a man of Macedonia had appeared, his arms outstretched, pleading, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." The urgency in his spectral voice had resonated deeply within Paul, a clear divine summons that left no room for doubt. It was a call not merely to a new land, but to an entire continent, a spiritual frontier awaiting the seeds of a revolutionary message. Silas, ever perceptive, had recognized the weight of this vision in Paul's recounting, understanding that such a vivid dream was no mere figment of a weary mind but a direct directive from the heavens. They had consulted with their fellow travelers, Timothy and Luke, and a collective conviction had settled upon them, a shared certainty that God Himself was beckoning them towards Europe. Their path had led them first to Troas, a port city on the northwestern coast of Asia Minor, where the air hummed with the comings and goings of merchants and sailors. From there, the short voyage across the narrow strait to Samothrace had been swift, the island's rugged peaks rising dramatically from the sea like ancient sentinels. The next day, with the dawn painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, they had reached Neapolis, the port of Philippi, and as their ship glided into the harbor, a new chapter seemed to unfold before them, rich with untold possibilities. Philippi itself was a city of considerable stature, a Roman colony of the first rank, distinguished by its proud claim of *ius italicum*, which granted its citizens the same rights as those leaving in Italy. The very air felt different here, imbued with the disciplined order of Roman administration and the echoes of military might. Broad, paved roads, meticulously laid by Roman engineers, stretched out from the port, leading inland towards the city gates. As Paul, Silas, Timothy, and Luke disembarked, their sandals met the firm earth of Europe, a continent that would forever bear the imprint of their footsteps. The journey from the bustling docks of Neapolis to the heart of Philippi was a pleasant one, the road winding through fertile fields where olive trees stood sentinel, their silver-green leaves shimmering in the afternoon light. The scent of wild thyme and sun-baked earth mingled with the distant murmur of city leaf fur, creating a tapestry of sensory impressions. As they approached the city walls, the grandeur of Roman architecture became more apparent, sturdy stone fortifications, impressive arches, and the distant gleam of a forum. This was a place where Roman customs and laws held sway, a vibrant hub of commerce and culture, Yet beneath its polished surface, Paul sensed a spiritual yearning, a silent plea that mirrored the Macedonian man's nocturnal cry. Their initial days in Philippi were spent observing, listening, and seeking. Paul, with his customary wisdom, knew that the message they carried was best introduced not through confrontation but through connection, through finding those whose hearts were already prepared to receive it. They sought out places where people gathered, where conversations flowed freely, and where the spiritual pulse of the city could be discerned. On the Sabbath, their search led them beyond the city gates, along the banks of the Ganges River, a tranquil ribbon of water that meandered through the landscape. It was a place known to be a gathering point for Jewish women, a quiet spot for prayer, as there was no synagogue within the city itself. The sun, now lower in the sky, cast long shadows across the riverbanks, and the gentle murmur of the water provided a soothing backdrop to the hushed conversations of the women gathered there. They sat on smooth river stones, their voices soft, their faces turned towards the setting sun, engaged in devotion. Among them sat Lydia, a woman whose presence commanded a quiet respect. She was from Thyatira, a city renowned for its dyes, and she herself was a dealer in purple cloth, a trade that spoke of both prosperity and discernment. Her garments, though modest, bore the subtle richness of her profession, and her demeanor was one of thoughtful contemplation. Lydia was a worshipper of God, a seeker of truth, her heart already attuned to spiritual matters, though she had not yet encountered the fullness of the gospel. Paul and his companions approached with gentle reverence, their presence a quiet ripple in the peaceful assembly. Paul began to speak, his voice soft yet resonant, weaving tales of a Messiah, of redemption, and of a love that transcended all earthly boundaries. He spoke not with thunderous pronouncements, but with an intimate sincerity, sharing the profound truths that had transformed his own life. Silas, seated nearby, offered quiet affirmations, his steady presence a grounding force. The other women listened with varying degrees of interest, some polite, some curious, but it was Lydia whose attention was wholly captured. As Paul spoke, a profound shift occurred within Lydia. It was as if a veil had been lifted from her understanding, a mist cleared from her heart. The words he uttered resonated with a deep, undeniable truth, stirring something ancient and profound within her soul. The message of Jesus, of his sacrifice and resurrection, was not merely information, it was a revelation, a light illuminating pathways she had long sought in the shadows. Her heart, which had always yearned for a deeper connection with the divine, now felt an expansive opening, a welcoming embrace of a truth she instinctively recognized as her own. She listened intently, her gaze fixed on Paul, absorbing every word, every nuance of his gentle yet powerful delivery. When Paul concluded his discourse, a hush fell over the gathering, broken only by the gentle lapping of the river against its banks. Lydia, her eyes shining with a newfound clarity, was the first to speak. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of conviction. "The Lord has opened my heart to respond to what you have said," she declared, her words a testament to the profound internal transformation she had just experienced. She understood, with an absolute certainty, that this was the truth she had been searching for. Without hesitation, Lydia invited Paul and his companions to her home, a spacious dwelling within the city that reflected her success and hospitality. "If you consider me a believer in the Lord," she urged, her sincerity evident, "Come and stay at my house." It was more than a polite invitation, it was an earnest plea, born of a desire to embrace this new faith fully and to share her abundance with those who had brought such light into her life. Her household, too, had been touched by her newfound conviction, and they were baptized along with her, a beautiful testament to the ripple effect of genuine faith. Lydia's home became their sanctuary, a haven of peace and fellowship in the bustling Roman colony. It was a place where they could rest, share meals, and continue to teach, a foundational stone for the nascent Christian community in Philippi. Her courageous hospitality was a beacon, demonstrating not only her commitment to the gospel but also her willingness to open her life and resources to further its spread. The warmth of her welcome, the scent of fresh bread, and the quiet hum of conversation within her walls provided a comforting contrast to the unknown challenges that lay ahead. For Paul and Silas, Lydia's open heart and generous spirit were a clear sign that the Macedonian call was indeed a divine one, and that their journey to Philippi, though fraught with potential difficulties, was already blessed with profound beginnings. The gentle rhythm of life in Lydia's home, the shared meals, and the earnest discussions about the teachings of Christ created an atmosphere of hopeful anticipation, a quiet strength building within them for whatever trials might come. The gentle rhythm of life in Lydia's home, the shared meals, and the earnest discussions about the teachings of Christ created an atmosphere of hopeful anticipation, a quiet strength building within them for whatever trials might come. Yet, beyond the comforting walls of Lydia's hospitality, the bustling streets of Philippi pulsed with a different kind of energy, one that was less receptive to the quiet revolution Paul and Silas sought to ignite. Each day, as Paul and Silas ventured out to the place of prayer by the river, their steps were shadowed by the vibrant, often boisterous, life of the Roman colony. The scent of baking bread mingled with the sharp tang of olive oil and the earthy smell of the nearby river, while the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer punctuated the murmur of conversations carried on in a mix of Greek and Latin. It was amidst this vibrant tapestry of daily existence that a particular figure began to emerge, a young woman whose presence, though initially a mere curiosity, soon wove itself inextricably into the fabric of their mission. She was a slave girl, slight of build, with eyes that seemed to hold a wisdom far beyond her years, yet often clouded by a distant, almost vacant, stare. Her owners, shrewd and calculating men, paraded her through the marketplace, her every utterance a commodity, for it was widely believed that a spirit of divination, a spirit of the python as many whispered, spoke through her, revealing fortunes and secrets to those willing to pay. Her voice, when it came, was not entirely her own, often carrying an unnerving resonance, a depth that seemed to vibrate from somewhere ancient and unseen, and the pronouncement she offered, though often cryptic, possessed an uncanny accuracy that kept her owners' purses heavy and their influence growing. Day after day, as Paul and Silas made their way to the river, the slave girl would appear, her steps often quickening to match their pace, her voice, tinged with an otherworldly echo, cutting through the mundane sounds of the city. "These men are servants of the Most High God," she would declare, her words ringing out with an undeniable truth that startled passers-by, who proclaimed to you the way of salvation. Her pronouncements were not malicious, nor were they inaccurate, for indeed, Paul and Silas were precisely that, heralds of a new path. Yet, her presence, her persistent, almost relentless, following, and the strange, disembodied quality of her voice, began to grate upon Paul's spirit. It was not the truth of her words that troubled him, but the source from which they sprang, the dark, manipulative power that held this young woman captive, using her as a mouthpiece for its own insidious purposes. Silas, ever the steady anchor, observed Paul's growing disquiet with a quiet understanding. He saw the furrow in Paul's brow deepen each time the girl's voice pierced the air, the subtle clenching of Paul's jaw as her pronouncements drew curious, sometimes mocking, glances from the crowds. They had come to Philippi to preach the gospel, to offer freedom, and here was a soul so profoundly enslaved, not merely by the bonds of ownership but by an unseen, malevolent force. The irony was a bitter one, a constant, unsettling counterpoint to the message of liberation they carried. Paul's heart, ever attuned to the suffering of others, ached for her, for the life stolen from her, for the dignity stripped away by the spirit that possessed her and the men who profited from her torment. He understood that her words, though true, were not born of faith or genuine conviction, but were a twisted manifestation of a darker power attempting to undermine their mission, perhaps to sow confusion or to subtly associate their divine message with the very forces they sought to conquer. After many days of this unsettling routine, Paul's patience, usually a deep well of endurance, began to wear thin. The constant, public declarations, though affirming, felt like a mockery, a perverse endorsement from the very enemy he was sent to confront. One afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the dusty streets, the slave girl once again approached them, her voice rising above the chatter of the market, echoing her familiar, unsettling proclamation. Paul stopped abruptly, turning to face her, his gaze piercing, not at the girl herself, but at the oppressive spirit he knew resided within her. His heart was heavy with a righteous indignation, a profound weariness of seeing this young life so cruelly exploited. He felt a surge of divine authority, a clear command from the Spirit within him. With a voice that resonated with quiet power, a voice that carried the weight of conviction and the certainty of divine intervention, Paul addressed the unseen entity directly. "I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." The words hung in the air, sharp and decisive, cutting through the usual din of the marketplace. A hush fell over the small crowd that had gathered, drawn by the girl's usual performance. For a moment, the girl's body seemed to stiffen, a tremor passing through her, and then, as if an invisible burden had been lifted, her eyes cleared, the vacant stare replaced by a flicker of bewildered awareness. The strange, resonant quality of her voice was gone, replaced by a simple, human breath. The spirit of the python that had held her captive for so long, had departed, leaving behind a young woman who, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, was truly herself. The transformation was immediate and profound, a quiet miracle unfolding before the eyes of the curious onlookers. The girl stood there, blinking, looking around with an expression of dawning comprehension, as if awakening from a long, troubled dream. Her owners, however, observed this dramatic change with a very different kind of dawning realization, one that was laced with alarm and a rapidly escalating fury. They had not seen a soul set free, they had seen their lucrative business, their steady stream of income, suddenly and irrevocably vanish. The girl, now free from the spirit's influence, could no longer divine fortunes, could no longer draw the crowds with her uncanny pronouncements. Their source of wealth, built on her suffering, had been summarily destroyed by the words of this foreign preacher. A cold, calculating rage began to simmer within them, quickly boiling over into a public display of outrage. They immediately seized Paul and Silas, their hands rough and unyielding, their faces contorted with indignation. "These men are disturbing our city," they shouted, their voices rising above the sudden commotion, drawing more attention. "They are Jews, advocating customs that are unlawful for us Romans to accept or practice." Their accusations were cunningly crafted, designed to ignite the prejudices of the Roman citizens of Philippi. They knew that simply complaining about lost profits would gain them little sympathy, but framing it as a threat to Roman law and order, as an affront to Roman identity, would stir the populace to action. The marketplace, moments before a scene of quiet wonder, now erupted into a cacophony of shouts and accusations. A crowd, easily swayed by the fervent cries of the girls' owners, began to gather, their mood quickly turning from curiosity to suspicion, then to outright hostility. The magistrates of Philippi, the Duumviri, were the city's highest civil officials, charged with maintaining public order and upholding Roman law. They were men of authority, accustomed to swift, decisive action, particularly when it came to perceived threats to the established social and religious order. When the clamor reached their ears, they quickly emerged, their expression stern and unyielding, their presence immediately commanding a certain fearful respect. The slave girls' owners, emboldened by the growing crowd and the arrival of the magistrates, pressed their case with venomous zeal. They painted Paul and Silas as dangerous agitators, as foreign interlopers disrupting the peace and challenging the very fabric of Roman society. The magistrates, without bothering to conduct any semblance of a fair inquiry, without asking for Paul and Silas's side of the story, or questioning the true nature of the slave girls' past, allowed themselves to be swept up by the tide of public sentiment. Their primary concern was not justice, but the swift restoration of order and the appeasement of the agitated crowd. The fact that Paul and Silas were Jews, and therefore viewed with a certain degree of suspicion by many Romans, only served to harden their resolve. With a curt, authoritative gesture, the magistrates commanded that Paul and Silas be stripped of their outer garments. The air, already thick with tension, now crackled with an ominous energy. The public stripping was a calculated humiliation, a prelude to the brutal punishment that was to follow, designed to assert Roman dominance and to send a clear message to any who dared to challenge their authority. Then, without further ado, they ordered the lictors, their official attendants, to beat Paul and Silas with rods. The lictors, powerful men trained in the application of Roman discipline, wielded their fasces with practiced, brutal efficiency. Each blow that landed on Paul and Silas's backs was not merely a physical assault, it was a public declaration of their perceived guilt, a stark reminder of the harsh realities of Roman justice, or rather, injustice, for those who stood outside the protective embrace of Roman citizenship. The whips whistled through the air, followed by the sickening thud of wood against flesh, each strike eliciting gasps from some in the crowd, and grim satisfaction from others. Paul and Silas endured the beating with a remarkable, almost unnerving, fortitude. They did not cry out, did not plead for mercy, their faces etched with pain but also with a profound, unshakable resolve. Silas, his body aching, his skin already bruised and broken, looked at Paul and saw in his companion's eyes not despair, but a quiet strength, a deep well of faith that seemed to transcend the physical agony. The injustice of it all was palpable, a heavy weight in the air, yet through the haze of pain, a strange sense of peace settled over them, a certainty that they were suffering for a cause far greater than themselves. After a merciless flurry of blows, their bodies raw and bleeding, the magistrates, their faces impassive, gave their final, chilling command. Paul and Silas were to be thrown into prison, and the jailer was instructed to guard them securely. This was not merely a suggestion, it was an order that carried the weight of Roman authority, an implicit threat that any lapse in vigilance would be met with severe consequences for the jailer himself. The jailer, a man hardened by years of dealing with criminals and the desperate, understood the gravity of the command. He knew that a secure prison meant not just locked doors, but an environment designed to break the spirit as well as the body. He led Paul and Silas away from the public square, through narrow, winding streets, their battered bodies stumbling with each step, the jeers of some in the crowd still ringing in their ears. The air grew colder, heavier, as they approached the prison, a formidable structure of rough-hewn stone that seemed to absorb all light and sound. The heavy wooden door, reinforced with thick iron bands, groaned open with a mournful sound, revealing a darkness that seemed to swallow them whole. The smell of mildew, stale air, and unwashed bodies assailed their senses, a grim welcome to their new, unwelcome abode. The jailer, taking no chances, led them past the main cells, past the common holding areas, and deeper into the prison's oppressive depths. He pushed them into the innermost cell, a place reserved for the most dangerous or troublesome prisoners, a place designed for maximum security and minimum comfort. It was a small, cramped space, devoid of any light, the walls cold and damp to the touch. The air was thick and heavy, each breath a conscious effort. Here, the clanking and scraping of heavy iron chains became a constant, unsettling symphony, a stark reminder of their complete lack of freedom. To ensure their absolute immobility, the jailer then brought out the stocks, heavy wooden planks with holes carved out for ankles and wrists. With grim efficiency, he forced Paul and Silas's swollen, bleeding feet into the narrow openings, securing them tightly. The rough wood chafed against their raw skin, exacerbating their pain, locking them into an agonizing, immobile position. The stocks were not merely a restraint, they were an instrument of torture, designed to inflict continuous discomfort, to prevent any movement that might offer a moment's relief. The cold, damp stone floor pressed against their injured backs, offering no respite, only a deeper chill that seeped into their bones. As the heavy door of the innermost cell clanged shut, plunging them into absolute darkness, the last vestiges of the outside world were extinguished. The silence that followed was not peaceful, but heavy and suffocating, broken only by the ragged sound of their own breathing and the distant, unsettling murmurs of other unseen prisoners. Paul and Silas, battered, bleeding, and bound, were now utterly alone in the chilling embrace of the Roman prison, their physical suffering immense, their future uncertain. Yet, even in that profound darkness, a flicker of something else remained, something that the Roman rods and the prison stocks could not touch, a quiet, unyielding flame of faith, ready to burn brighter than any despair. The heavy wooden door, thick with iron bands, groaned shut behind them, plunging the small, damp cell into an almost absolute darkness that pressed in from all sides, a suffocating blanket woven from stone and despair. The air, thick and cold, carried the metallic tang of old blood and the sickle-sweet scent of mildew, a pervasive dampness that clung to their skin and seeped into their very bones, chilling them to the marrow. Paul, his back a canvas of searing pain from the magistrate's rods, leaned heavily against the rough-hewn stone wall, the coarse texture scraping against his already abraded skin, each movement a fresh agony that stole his breath. Silas, equally bruised and battered, slumped beside him, his head bowed, the rhythmic clinking of the heavy stocks around his ankles and wrists a constant, grating reminder of their grim predicament, a cruel counterpoint to the frantic thumping of his own heart. The sounds of the prison were a symphony of human misery, the distant, guttural cries of other inmates, the occasional clank of a guard's spear against the stone floor in the corridor outside, and the perpetual drip, drip, drip of water somewhere in the unseen depths of the dungeon, each drop echoing with a hollow finality. Paul closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to momentarily escape the oppressive blackness, though it offered no true respite, for behind his eyelids, the scene of their public humiliation replayed itself with vivid, brutal clarity. He could still feel the sting of the whips, the bite of the rods, the burning shame of being paraded through the marketplace, stripped of dignity and subjected to the jeers of the very crowd they had sought to serve. The memory was a fresh wound, festering in the quiet dark. Silas shifted, a low groan escaping his lips as the movement sent a fresh wave of agony through his lacerated back. He tried to adjust his position, but the stocks held him fast, unforgiving and unyielding. "Paul," he whispered, his voice hoarse and barely audible above the rhythmic drip, "do you remember her eyes?" He was speaking of the young woman, the slave girl who had been the unwitting catalyst for their current suffering. Her eyes, wide and vacant, had haunted him since their first encounter, a silent plea for release from the oppressive spirit that had held her captive, forcing prophecies from her lips for her master's gain. Paul nodded slowly, a small, almost imperceptible movement that nonetheless sent a jolt of pain through his neck and shoulders. He remembered her, yes, and the profound sense of compassion that had welled up within him, a divine urgency to set her free. He had spoken the words, "I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her," and the Spirit had obeyed, leaving the girl calm, her eyes clear for the first time in what must have been years. But that act of mercy, that moment of divine intervention, had swiftly spiraled into their current nightmare. The girl's masters, their faces contorted with rage and greed, had seen not a soul set free, but their source of income abruptly severed, their future profits vanishing like smoke. They had seized Paul and Silas with a ferocity born of avarice, dragging them through the bustling streets, their accusations ringing out like discordant gongs. "These men are Jews," they had shouted, their voices laced with venom. "They are throwing our city into an uproar by advocating customs unlawful for us Romans to accept or practice." The words had been a calculated poison, designed to ignite the volatile prejudices of the Roman populace, to paint Paul and Silas as seditious foreign agitators. Paul remembered the growing roar of the crowd, a beast awakening, its hunger for spectacle and conformity easily roused. He remembered the magistrates, the duumviri, sitting in judgment, their faces stern and unyielding, their authority absolute in this Roman colony. They were men of order, of law, of the empire, and any perceived threat to that order, especially from foreigners, was met with swift, brutal suppression. The slave girl's masters had played their part well, appealing to the magistrates' inherent suspicion of anything that deviated from Roman custom, anything that might disrupt the carefully constructed peace. The accusation of advocating unlawful customs had been a masterstroke of manipulation, tapping into the deep-seated Roman pride and their disdain for foreign practices. "They didn't even ask," Silas murmured, his voice laced with a bitter irony that was uncharacteristic of him. "They didn't ask for our names, our purpose, our citizenship, nothing. Just the accusations, and then the rods." He shifted again, trying to find a position that didn't press against his raw wounds. The injustice of it all gnawed at him, a sharp, persistent ache that rivaled the physical pain. To be condemned without a hearing, to be beaten publicly without a trial, to be thrown into the deepest part of the prison without even the pretense of due process, it was an affront to every notion of fairness, a stark reminder of their vulnerability as non-Romans in a Roman world. Paul understood Silas's frustration, the burning indignation that simmered beneath his quiet demeanor. He too felt the sting of injustice, the raw wound of being treated as less than human, as mere objects upon which the magistrates could assert their power to appease a fickle crowd. But even in this moment of profound despair, a different thought began to stir within him, a deeper current beneath the surface of his pain. He thought of the words he had preached, the message of a God who saw beyond earthly distinctions, beyond Roman law and Jewish custom, a God who offered freedom not from physical chains, but from the spiritual bondage of sin and despair. Was this not, in its own twisted way, an opportunity to demonstrate the power of that message, even here, in the very heart of Roman oppression? The cold, damp air seemed to grow heavier, pressing down on them, amplifying the sense of isolation. Paul could almost taste the fear that hung in the air, a metallic tang on his tongue. Yet, amidst the fear and the pain, a strange sense of peace, fragile yet persistent, began to unfurl within him, like a hardy bloom pushing through cracked pavement. He thought of the countless times he had faced adversity, the shipwrecks, the beatings, the hunger, the sleepless nights, all endured for the sake of the gospel. This was but another chapter, another trial, another opportunity for God's glory to be revealed in the most unlikely of places. Silas, sensing Paul's quiet contemplation, remained silent, his own thoughts drifting through the labyrinthine corridors of his mind. He had joined Paul on this journey, leaving behind the familiar comforts of Jerusalem, driven by a conviction that the message of Christ was meant for all people, even the Gentiles of Macedonia. He had anticipated hardship, perhaps even persecution, but the brutality of the beating, the swiftness of their condemnation, and the utter darkness of their cell had been a shock to his spirit, a stark confrontation with the harsh realities of their mission. He wondered if this was the end, if their journey would conclude here, in this forgotten corner of a Roman dungeon, their voices silenced, their mission unfinished. A wave of weariness, profound and bone-deep, washed over him, threatening to extinguish the last embers of his resolve. But then, a memory surfaced, a fragment of a hymn, a melody from their worship services, a song of praise that spoke of God's unwavering faithfulness, even in the face of overwhelming odds. It was a faint whisper at first, a fragile thought, but it began to grow, to gather strength, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. He remembered the stories of old, of prophets and patriarchs who had faced trials far greater than their own, yet had emerged victorious, their faith refined and strengthened. He thought of Jesus, who had endured far greater suffering, far greater injustice, yet had remained steadfast, his gaze fixed on the ultimate triumph. Paul, as if sensing the subtle shift in Silas's spirit, turned his head slightly, his eyes, though unseen in the darkness, conveying a quiet understanding. He knew the battles that raged within the heart of his companion, the struggle between despair and hope, between the crushing weight of their circumstances and the soaring promise of their faith. He reached out a hand, his fingers, though bruised and swollen, finding Silas's arm, a silent gesture of solidarity, a tangible connection in the suffocating void. The touch was a small spark, but it ignited something within Silas, a flicker of courage, a renewed sense of purpose. The injustice of their situation, the arbitrary cruelty of the magistrates, the cold indifference of the Roman system, all of it still weighed heavily upon them, a suffocating blanket of oppression. Yet, beneath that blanket, a seed of resilience had begun to sprout, nourished by their shared faith, by the quiet strength that flowed between them. They were in chains, yes, their bodies broken, their freedom stolen, but their spirits, though bruised, remained defiantly unbound. The prison, designed to crush the will and extinguish all hope, would soon discover that within its darkest confines, a different kind of light was beginning to stir, a light that no Roman rod, no heavy chain, and no magistrate's decree could ever truly extinguish. The night was long, the darkness profound, but the seeds of midnight songs were already being sown in the silent, suffering hearts of Paul and Silas, preparing to bloom in the most unexpected of places. The heavy wooden door, thick with iron bands, groaned shut behind them, plunging Paul and Silas into an immediate, suffocating darkness that seemed to press in on their very souls. The air, thick with the stench of mildew, stale sweat, and the faint, metallic tang of old blood, offered no respite, clinging to their skin like a shroud. Each breath they drew felt heavy, laden with the despair of countless others who had suffered within these very walls. The stone floor beneath them, rough and uneven, offered a cold, unyielding embrace, a stark contrast to the warmth of the sun they had known just hours before. The clanking of the jailer's keys, receding into the distance, was the last sound of the outside world they heard before an abyssal silence descended, broken only by the rhythmic drip of water somewhere in the unseen depths of the dungeon. Silas, his body still throbbing with the memory of the rods and the raw, burning sting of the open wounds on his back, leaned heavily against the rough-hewn stone wall. The stocks, cruelly fashioned to stretch and twist their limbs, held his feet in an agonizing grip, each movement sending a fresh wave of pain through his battered body. He could feel the coarse wood chafing against his ankles, already raw and swollen, and the heavy iron manacles around his wrists dug deep, biting into his flesh with every slight shift. A shiver, not entirely from the cold, ran through him, a visceral response to the sheer brutality of their situation. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to steady his racing heart, to quiet the insistent thrum of pain that threatened to overwhelm his senses. He thought of the vibrant marketplace of Philippi, the faces of the new believers, Lydia's kind hospitality, and the joyous fellowship they had shared just that morning, a stark, almost dreamlike contrast to the grim reality that now enveloped them. A profound sense of injustice, sharp and bitter, began to coil in his gut, threatening to choke the last vestiges of his composure. He heard Paul stir beside him, a soft, almost imperceptible groan escaping his lips as he too adjusted to the unyielding embrace of the stocks. Silas knew Paul's wounds were likely even more severe, his frame perhaps less accustomed to such physical abuse, yet there was a quiet determination in the older man's movements, a resilience that even the darkness could not entirely obscure. Silas opened his eyes again, peering into the inky blackness, trying to discern Paul's form. He could feel the weight of their shared suffering, the profound sense of isolation that permeated the dungeon, but even amidst the despair, a flicker of something else began to stir within him, a deep-seated conviction, a quiet certainty that their God was not confined by these stone walls, nor silenced by the clanking of chains. "Paul," Silas whispered, his voice hoarse, a mere breath in the vast silence, Are you well?" The question felt inadequate, almost foolish, given their circumstances, but it was all he could offer, a small tether of human connection in the crushing isolation. Paul shifted again, and Silas heard the faint rasp of cloth against stone, followed by a slow, deliberate exhalation. "As well as one can be, dear brother," Paul replied, his voice low but steady, lacking any trace of self-pity, though Silas could detect the underlying current of pain in its timbre. "The body aches, it is true, but the spirit, Silas, the spirit remains unbowed. We knew this road would not be easy, did we not? The Master himself warned us of such tribulations." He paused, and Silas imagined him taking a deep, fortifying breath in the darkness. It is in these moments, perhaps, that our faith is most truly tested and most profoundly revealed. Silas nodded slowly, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but the words resonated deep within him, a balm to his troubled spirit. Paul's unwavering perspective, even in the face of such profound suffering, had always been a source of strength for him. It was a reminder that their mission was not merely one of comfort and ease, but one that demanded endurance, sacrifice, and an unshakable trust in the divine purpose that guided their every step. He thought of the countless times they had spoken of perseverance, of counting it all joy when they encountered trials, and now, here they were, leaving out those very words in the most literal and painful way imaginable. The hypocrisy of their accusers, the injustice of the magistrates, the cruelty of the guards, to all of it seemed to recede slightly in the face of Paul's quiet resolve. As the hours dragged on, marked only by the slow, painful throb of their injuries and the occasional, distant sound of a guard's heavy footsteps echoing from a corridor far above, the darkness deepened, becoming almost a physical presence. The cold seeped into their bones, a relentless chill that no amount of shifting could alleviate. Silas found himself drifting in and out of a restless, pain-filled slumber, his mind replaying the day's events in a fragmented, nightmarish loop. He saw the angry mob, felt the sting of the rods, read the shouts of condemnation. Each time he awoke, the reality of the stocks, the chains, and the suffocating darkness pressed in anew, threatening to overwhelm him. Yet, through it all, Paul's presence beside him remained a quiet anchor. Silas could hear him, at times, murmuring softly, not in complaint, but in prayer. The words were indistinguishable, lost in the vastness of the dungeon, but the earnestness, the profound devotion in Paul's voice, was palpable. It was a prayer not for release, Silas sensed, but for strength, for understanding, for the steadfastness to endure whatever lay ahead. This quiet communion with God, even in the depths of their suffering, began to stir something deep within Silas, a familiar warmth that had often sustained him on their arduous journeys. He thought of the songs they had sung together on dusty roads, in crowded synagogues, in quiet homes to hymns of praise, psalms of lament, declarations of God's faithfulness. These were not mere melodies, they were expressions of their deepest convictions, woven into the very fabric of their beings. And now, in this place of utter desolation, where all other comforts were stripped away, these songs began to surface in his memory, a quiet rebellion against the encroaching despair. "Paul," Silas whispered again, his voice gaining a little more strength, a new resolve beginning to firm within him. "Do you remember the hymn we sang in Ansh, the one about the Lord being our strength and our shield?" Paul stirred, and Silas could almost feel the slight shift in the air as Paul turned his head in his direction. "Ah, yes, Silas," Paul replied, a hint of something akin to a smile in his voice, though Silas could not see it. "A powerful truth, indeed. The Lord is my strength and my shield, in him my heart trusts, and I am helped." He began to hum the melody softly, a low, resonant sound that seemed to chase away a fraction of the darkness, a fragile thread of beauty in the stark ugliness of their prison. Silas joined him, at first hesitantly, his voice raspy and thin, but as the familiar notes began to flow, a quiet strength began to well up within him. The pain in his back, the ache in his limbs, the chafing of the stocks, to none of it vanished, but it receded, becoming a distant hum beneath the rising tide of their worship. They sang softly at first, their voices tentative, almost swallowed by the vastness of the dungeon, but with each verse, with each shared breath, their confidence grew. The words, once sung in sunlit courtyards and bustling markets, now took on a new, profound meaning in the suffocating darkness of their cell. They were not merely reciting verses, they were declaring truth, affirming their faith in the face of overwhelming despair. Their voices, though still subdued, began to carry, echoing faintly off the damp stone walls, a strange, ethereal sound in the oppressive silence. They sang of God's unfailing love, of his deliverance from all troubles, of the hope that transcended earthly suffering. Each note was an act of defiance, each word a prayer of unwavering trust. The air in their small, dark cell, once heavy with the stench of despair, seemed to lighten, to vibrate with a different kind of energy. It was a subtle shift, almost imperceptible, but Silas felt it deep in his bones, to a sense of peace, a quiet joy that defied all logic, all reason. Unbeknownst to Paul and Silas, their midnight melodies were not confined to their cell alone. The sounds, faint at first, then growing steadily stronger, began to seep through the thick stone walls, carried by the currents of the cold, damp air. In the adjacent cells, other prisoners, accustomed to the sounds of groans, curses, or the heavy silence of resignation, began to stir. They were a motley collection of individuals, to common criminals, debtors, political dissidents, and those who had simply fallen afoul of Roman law. Their lives were harsh, their hopes often extinguished, and their nights were usually filled with the restless turning of bodies on straw, the gnawing of hunger, or the quiet despair of their own thoughts. One such prisoner, a man named Lucius, incarcerated for a petty theft committed out of desperation, lay on his hard pallet, his mind a turbulent sea of regret and bitterness. He had heard every sound in the prison for the past 3 months, every creak, every sigh, every distant shout. But these sounds, these voices singing in the deep of the night, were unlike anything he had ever heard within these walls. They were not the drunken bawling of a new inmate, nor the mournful wail of a man broken by torture. These were hymns, full of a strange, unyielding hope, sung with a conviction that seemed to defy their very surroundings. He strained his ears, trying to catch the words, but they were too muffled, too distant. Yet, the melody itself, simple and pure, resonated with something long dormant within him, a faint echo of a childhood memory, perhaps, of a time before his life had descended into this grim reality. He found himself listening intently, his usual restless tossing forgotten, a flicker of curiosity replacing his customary despair. In another cell, an old woman, imprisoned for practicing some forbidden local cult, sat huddled in a corner, her eyes wide open in the darkness. She had long since given up hope, her spirit withered by years of hardship and the crushing weight of her current predicament. But as the voices of Paul and Silas reached her, a strange warmth began to spread through her cold, aching limbs. She recognized the sincerity in their tones, the unshakable faith that permeated every note. It was a faith she had once known, in a different form, a different context, but the essence was the same: to a profound connection to something beyond the visible world, a source of strength that could sustain one even in the face of death. She listened, her ancient heart stirred by the unexpected beauty, a tear tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. The other prisoners, a silent, unseen congregation, listened from their own dark corners, their faces etched with a mixture of bewilderment, curiosity, and a nascent, fragile hope. They had seen men come and go, heard their cries of pain, their desperate pleas, their defiant curses. But they had never witnessed such an act of worship in this place of torment. These men, beaten and chained, were not crying out for mercy from their captors, they were singing praises to their God. It was an anomaly, a profound disruption of the prison's established order, a testament to a spirit that refused to be broken. They remained still, their ears attuned to the strange, beautiful sounds, their minds grappling with the profound implications of what they were hearing. The darkness of the prison, usually a source of terror and isolation, was now filled with an unexpected, almost sacred, symphony. As Paul and Silas continued to sing, their voices growing stronger, more confident, a profound sense of peace settled over them. The pain in their bodies, though still present, became a distant echo, overshadowed by the overwhelming presence of their God. They were no longer merely prisoners in a Roman dungeon, they were worshippers in a sanctuary, their chains becoming instruments of praise, their suffering a testament to their unwavering faith. They sang of resurrection, of victory over death, of the ultimate triumph of light over darkness. Their prayers, once whispered, now rose in unison, a powerful declaration of trust in the unseen, a profound act of spiritual defiance. Then, without warning, the very foundations of the prison began to tremble. It started as a low rumble, a deep, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very earth beneath them. The stone walls groaned, a terrifying sound that spoke of immense pressure and impending collapse. Dust, thick and choking, rained down from the ceiling, filling the air with a gritty, acrid taste. The heavy wooden beams above them creaked and shrieked, protesting the sudden, violent agitation. The ground beneath their feet convulsed, throwing their bodies against the unyielding stocks, sending fresh jolts of pain through their battered limbs. The earthquake, sudden and brutal, intensified with terrifying speed. The entire prison seemed to sway, a massive, ancient beasts struggling against an invisible force. The clanking of chains, once a symbol of their captivity, now became a chaotic, deafening symphony as the iron links rattled violently against the stone, against the wooden stocks, against each other. The air was filled with the roar of shifting earth, the splintering of wood, and the terrifying crash of falling debris. The darkness, already absolute, was now punctuated by the terrifying sounds of destruction. Silas cried out, a sharp gasp of pain and surprise, as the stocks holding his feet suddenly twisted and groaned under the immense force, threatening to tear his ankles. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing himself for the inevitable collapse, for the crushing weight of stone and timber. Fear, raw and primal, surged through him, momentarily eclipsing the peace he had found in worship. He felt the stocks holding his feet give way with a sharp crack, the heavy wooden beam splintering and breaking apart, releasing his ankles from their agonizing grip. At the same moment, the iron manacles around his wrists, which had seemed so immovably secure, snapped open with a loud clang, falling away from his wrists with a surprising lightness. Beside him, Paul too was thrown about by the violent tremors. Silas heard a grunt of effort, followed by the distinct sound of wood splintering and iron clanking. When the initial, most violent phase of the earthquake subsided, leaving behind a terrifying silence punctuated only by the settling of dust and the distant groans of the prison structure, Silas cautiously opened his eyes. He could not see Paul in the absolute darkness, but he could hear his breathing, ragged but steady. "Silas?" Paul's voice, though strained, held a note of wonder. Are you free?" Silas, still disoriented, reached out a tentative hand, feeling the rough stone where the stocks had been. His ankles, though bruised and aching, were indeed free. His wrists, though raw from the manacles, were unchained. A profound sense of shock, mingled with an almost unbelievable exhilaration, coursed through him. "Yes, Paul. I am free. The chains, the stocks, they are broken." Then a new sound read their ears, one that sent a fresh wave of awe through Silas. From the other cells, from the dark corners where the other prisoners had been listening, came the sounds of similar liberation. The clanking of chains, the splintering of wood, the heavy thud of iron falling to the ground too, it was happening everywhere. The earthquake had not merely shaken the prison, it had systematically, miraculously, undone every restraint. The heavy, iron-bound doors of the cells, designed to withstand siege, now stood ajar, their massive bolts sprung, their hinges twisted and broken. The very architecture of their captivity had been undone. A profound silence descended once more, but this was a different kind of silence to a silence of stunned disbelief, of profound wonder. The dust, though still thick, began to settle, and a faint, ethereal light, perhaps from the moon filtering through a newly opened crack in the ceiling, or from a distant lantern in the guardhouse, began to penetrate the absolute darkness, casting long, shifting shadows. In this dim, uncertain light, Silas could make out the forms of other prisoners, standing in the doorways of their cells, their faces etched with a mixture of terror, confusion, and dawning comprehension. Their chains lay broken at their feet, their cell doors swung open, inviting them to step out into the unknown. Yet, remarkably, none of them moved. No one rushed for the open doors, no one attempted to flee into the night. They stood transfixed, their eyes wide, their gazes fixed not on the escape route, but on Paul and Silas, the two men who had been singing in the darkness, the two men whose midnight melodies had preceded this impossible, miraculous liberation. They had witnessed the raw power of their God, a power that had shaken the very foundations of the earth, a power that had broken every chain and opened every door, not with human force, but with a divine tremor. Their silent observation, their collective decision to remain, was a testament to the profound impact of what they had just witnessed, a silent acknowledgement of the sacred, terrifying force that had just intervened in their lives. The jailer, who would soon come rushing in, would find not an empty prison, but a multitude of witnesses, their eyes fixed on the two men who had dared to sing in the darkness, their hearts stirred by the impossible miracle that had unfolded before them. The air, thick with the scent of damp stone and the metallic tang of fear, now vibrated with a new, unsettling energy. A low, guttural rumble, like the groan of the earth itself, began to thrum beneath the prisoners' bare feet, a sound that started deep within the bedrock and ascended slowly, steadily, until it filled the entire cavernous space of the prison. The faint, flickering light of the distant torches danced wildly, casting elongated, grotesque shadows that writhed and stretched across the rough-hewn walls, mimicking the growing terror in the hearts of those confined within. Dust, fine and ancient, began to sift down from the ceiling, a silent, gritty rain that coated everything in a pale, ghostly film. Silas, his voice still resonating with the final notes of their hymn, felt the stone floor beneath him shift violently, a sudden, jarring lurch that threw his body against the unyielding wood of the stocks. A sharp, searing pain shot through his already bruised and swollen ankles, but even as his breath hitched, his eyes, wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension, remained fixed on Paul. Paul, too, had been jostled, his head striking the rough stone behind him with a dull thud, yet a strange, almost serene expression had settled upon his features, a look of profound understanding that seemed to transcend the immediate chaos. He met Silas's gaze, a silent communication passing between them, a shared recognition of the extraordinary power that was now manifesting around them. Then, with a deafening roar that swallowed all other sounds, the very foundations of the prison seemed to tear themselves apart. The walls groaned and cracked, fissures appearing like jagged lightning bolts across their ancient surfaces, sending showers of mortar and small stones raining down. The heavy iron bars that secured the cell doors shrieked and twisted, their embedded ends wrenching free from the crumbling stone with a sound like tortured metal. The wooden stocks, which had held Paul and Silas in their agonizing grip for hours, splintered and shattered, releasing their captive limbs with a sudden, dizzying freedom. Chains, thick and heavy, that had bound countless prisoners to the walls, snapped with explosive force, their links scattering across the floor like discarded bones. The ground beneath them bucked and heaved, a monstrous, unseen beast struggling to break free from its subterranean lair, and in that moment of utter pandemonium, every single cell door in the prison burst open, swinging inward with a resounding crash, revealing gaping, dark voids where once there had been impenetrable barriers. The other prisoners, who had been huddled in their cells, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and fascination as they listened to Paul and Silas's songs, were now thrown into disarray. A collective gasp, a ragged, terrified sound, tore through the air as they witnessed the impossible. Their chains, too, had fallen, lying in broken heaps around their feet, and the doors to their confinement now stood wide open, inviting escape. Yet, amidst the dust and the tremors, a strange stillness settled upon them. No one moved. No one rushed for the exits. They remained, frozen in place, their eyes, wide and disbelieving, darting from the splintered stocks that had held Paul and Silas to the gaping doorways, then back to the two men who now stood, miraculously unbound, in the center of their shattered cell. A profound, almost sacred silence, broken only by the continued groaning of the earth, enveloped them all, a testament to the sheer, overwhelming magnitude of the event they had just witnessed. Meanwhile, in his small, Spartan quarters adjacent to the prison, the Philippian jailer had been jolted from a fitful sleep by the first, ominous rumblings. He was a man whose leave was dictated by order, by the rigid adherence to Roman law and the unyielding demands of his duty. The prison was his domain, a fortress of stone and iron, and its security was his singular, paramount responsibility. The initial tremors had been enough to send a cold dread snaking through his gut, a premonition of disaster, but when the full force of the earthquake struck, it was as if the very world he knew was being ripped apart. His small oil lamp, perched precariously on a rough wooden table, toppled and shattered, plunging the room into absolute darkness. He scrambled to his feet, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, his hands instinctively reaching for the short sword that always lay beside his bed. The sound of crumbling stone, the splintering of wood, and the terrifying, metallic shriek of twisting iron filled his ears, a symphony of destruction that spoke of utter ruin. He stumbled through the darkness, his bare feet crunching on fallen debris, his mind racing with a single, horrifying thought: the prison. His prison. He burst out of his quarters, his eyes straining to pierce the gloom of the inner courtyard, which was now filled with a swirling cloud of dust and the acrid smell of pulverized stone. The air was thick with the lingering vibrations of the earth's fury, and a chilling silence had fallen, more terrifying than any noise. He could see, through the settling dust, the impossible, the massive, iron-bound gates of the prison, usually secured with multiple heavy bolts, now hung askew, their hinges torn from the stone. The inner cell doors, which he had personally ensured were doubly locked, stood agape, black mouths gaping into the darkness. A wave of icy despair washed over him, a cold, suffocating dread that seized his very soul. The prisoners. They would be gone. All of them. And among them, the two he had been specifically ordered to guard with the utmost vigilance, Paul and Silas, the men who had caused such a stir in the city, the men whose escape would surely mean his own agonizing death. Roman law was clear: if a prisoner escaped under a jailer's watch, the jailer would suffer the same punishment, or worse. He pictured the grim, brutal efficiency of Roman justice, the lash, the cross, the slow, public humiliation. His family, his reputation, everything would be lost. His hand tightened on the hilt of his sword, his knuckles white. The thought, cold and stark, formed in his mind: a quick, honorable death by his own hand was preferable to the prolonged torment and shame that awaited him. He would not face the wrath of the magistrates, nor the scorn of his peers. He would not endure the slow, agonizing public execution. With a desperate, choked sob, he drew the blade, its polished surface catching a faint, spectral gleam from the distant, flickering torchlight that still stubbornly burned in the outer guard post. He raised the sword, its point glinting with grim resolve, and pressed it against his stomach, just below his ribs, his breath catching in his throat. "Do not harm yourself," a voice, clear and strong, cut through the suffocating silence, echoing through the fractured stone corridors. "We are all here." The jailer froze, his hand trembling, the sword's point pricking his skin. The voice. It was Paul's. He knew it instantly, the same voice that had sung hymns just hours before. He lowered the sword slowly, his eyes, wide with disbelief, searching the gloom. How could they be here? How could any of them be here? He had seen the devastation with his own eyes. The doors were open. The chains were broken. Escape was not merely possible, it was inevitable. He stumbled forward, his heart still pounding with a mixture of terror and a nascent, fragile hope, his torch having been extinguished in the quake. He fumbled for another, his hand shaking so violently he could barely strike the flint. When the flame finally caught, casting a dancing circle of light around him, he rushed towards the innermost cell, the one where he had personally secured Paul and Silas. What he saw there defied all reason, all logic, all his understanding of the world. The cell door, indeed, hung wide open, its heavy iron hinges twisted and broken. The wooden stocks, which had held the two men, lay in shattered pieces on the floor. And yet, there they stood, Paul and Silas, not just within the cell, but among the other prisoners, who were also still there, huddled together, their faces pale and awestruck, their broken chains lying uselessly around their feet. Not a single one had fled. Not one. Paul stood tall, his gaze fixed on the jailer, his expression one of profound compassion, devoid of any judgment or fear. Silas, though clearly in pain from his injuries, stood beside him, a quiet strength radiating from him. The other prisoners, a motley collection of thieves, debtors, and agitators, remained in their places, their eyes, once filled with despair, now held a strange, unreadable light. They had witnessed something truly extraordinary, something that had held them captive even as their physical bonds had been shattered. The jailer stared, his mind struggling to reconcile what his eyes saw with what his reason dictated. The impossible had happened. The very earth had rebelled, the prison had been torn asunder, and yet, these men, these prisoners, had chosen to remain. And Paul, the man he had beaten and locked away, had just saved him from taking his own life. A different kind of tremor now ran through the jailer, one that had nothing to do with the earth's convulsions. It was a tremor of the soul, a profound, unsettling shift in his understanding of the universe. He fell to his knees, not out of fear of punishment, but out of an overwhelming sense of awe and a dawning realization of his own utter helplessness. The sword, forgotten, clattered to the ground beside him. His stern, hardened face, usually a mask of Roman discipline, was now contorted with raw emotion, tears streaming down his dust-streaked cheeks. "Sirs," he choked out, his voice hoarse with terror and a burgeoning, desperate hope, "what must I do to be saved?" His question was not merely about escaping the wrath of the magistrates, though that fear still lingered. It was a cry from the depths of his being, a recognition that he had just encountered a power far greater than any Roman emperor, a power that had shaken not just the prison walls, but the very foundations of his existence. He had seen the miraculous, had witnessed an act of divine intervention that had defied all logic, and in that moment, he understood that there was a salvation far more profound than mere physical freedom. Paul, stepping forward, his voice gentle yet firm, knelt before the trembling jailer. "Believe in the Lord Jesus," he said, his eyes filled with an unwavering certainty, "and you will be saved, you and your household." Silas, too, moved closer, his presence a silent affirmation of Paul's words. The other prisoners watched in stunned silence, their faces reflecting a mixture of confusion and a nascent curiosity. They had heard Paul and Silas speak of this Lord Jesus before, in their songs and prayers, but now, seeing the jailer, their tormentor, brought to his knees by the very men he had imprisoned, a new understanding began to dawn. The jailer, still on his knees, looked up at Paul, his eyes searching for some sign, some confirmation. The compassion in Paul's gaze, the unwavering conviction in his voice, offered a solace he had never known. The fear that had gripped him for so long, the fear of failure, of punishment, of death, began to recede, replaced by a fragile, yet potent, sense of hope. He had sought to end his life, to escape a fate he deemed inevitable, but now, a path to a different kind of salvation, a salvation of the spirit, was being offered to him by the very men he had wronged. He rose slowly, his body still trembling, but a new resolve hardening his gaze. He led Paul and Silas out of the shattered cell, past the other prisoners who now watched with open curiosity, and through the dust-filled corridors. The prison, once a symbol of his authority and control, now lay in ruins, a testament to a power far beyond his comprehension. He brought them to his own quarters, the small room now littered with debris, and with trembling hands, he began to tend to their wounds, washing the dried blood from their backs, gently cleaning the deep gashes left by the rods, and applying soothing salves. His touch, once rough and impersonal, was now filled with a profound tenderness, a desperate need to atone, to serve. As he cared for them, Paul and Silas spoke to him, not with condemnation, but with words of grace and truth. They explained the message of Jesus, the story of his life, his death, and his resurrection, the promise of forgiveness and new life. The jailer listened, his heart open, absorbing every word, every promise. The fear that had once defined him, the rigid adherence to Roman law, the cold, impersonal demands of his duty, all began to melt away, replaced by a burgeoning faith, a profound sense of peace that settled deep within his soul. Then, without hesitation, he gathered his entire household, his wife, his children, his servants, and brought them before Paul and Silas. He wanted them to hear the same message, to experience the same transformative power that had just shattered his world and rebuilt it anew. Paul and Silas, their voices weary but filled with an unyielding passion, spoke to them all, sharing the good news of Jesus, the promise of salvation for all who believed. And in that broken, dust-filled prison, amidst the ruins of what had been, a new foundation was laid, not of stone and iron, but of faith and hope. The jailer, his heart overflowing with joy, then led them all to the nearest water source, and there, beneath the pale, dawning light of a new day, he and his entire household were baptized, washing away the old and embracing the new, a testament to the miraculous power that had shaken the earth and transformed a hardened Roman official into a devoted follower of Christ. The pale, dawning light of a new day, filtering through the narrow streets of Philippi, found the jailer and his newly baptized household returning to their home, their steps lighter than the morning mist that still clung to the cobblestones. The air, once heavy with the scent of fear and despair, now carried the subtle fragrance of fresh water and a newfound peace, a peace that had settled deep within each soul present. The jailer, no longer the stern, duty-bound official, walked with a quiet reverence. His eyes, which had so recently reflected terror, now shone with an inner luminescence, a profound joy that seemed to emanate from his very being. His family, still damp from the baptismal waters, moved beside him, their faces radiant with a shared understanding, a silent, powerful communion that transcended mere words. Silas, observing the transformation, felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him, a warmth that spread through his weary limbs, chasing away the lingering chill of the prison and the memory of the stocks. He watched the jailer, who had so recently contemplated ending his own life, now guiding his family with a tender protectiveness, his hand gently resting on his wife's arm, his gaze sweeping over his children with an affection that had perhaps been buried beneath the weight of his responsibilities. It was a testament, Silas mused, to the boundless grace that could penetrate even the hardest of hearts, shattering the chains of despair more effectively than any earthquake could break physical bonds. The night's events, tumultuous and terrifying as they had been, had yielded a harvest of souls, a miracle far greater than the opening of prison doors. As they entered the jailer's home, a modest dwelling that adjoined the prison walls, a sense of quiet order began to reassert itself, though it was an order now infused with an entirely new spirit. The jailer's wife, her eyes still glistening with tears of joy, moved with a newfound purpose, her movements fluid and graceful as she began to prepare a meal. The children, their initial or slowly giving way to a more childlike curiosity, watched Paul and Silas with wide, wondering eyes, as if expecting another marvel to unfold before them. The aroma of freshly baked bread and simmering stew soon began to fill the air, a comforting scent that spoke of nourishment and hospitality, a stark contrast to the stale, metallic tang of the prison. Paul, though still bearing the marks of the scourging on his back, felt a surge of renewed strength, not physical, but spiritual, as he surveyed the scene. He saw not just a family, but a nascent community of believers gathered around a table that would soon become an altar of fellowship. The jailer, his face still etched with the weariness of a night spent in terror and then in profound spiritual awakening, offered them seats of honor, insisting that they partake of the first meal prepared in his transformed household. "You must eat," the jailer urged, his voice soft, yet firm, a gentle command born of genuine care. "You have endured much, and this house is now yours, as you have given us so much more." Silas, accepting the offer, felt the warmth of the wooden bench beneath him, a simple comfort that felt luxurious after the cold, hard stone of the prison cell. He watched as the jailer's wife placed bowls of steaming stew before them, the rich, earthy scent rising to meet them, promising sustenance and warmth. The children, sensing the solemnity and significance of the moment, sat quietly, their small hands clasped in their laps, their gazes fixed on Paul and Silas, absorbing every detail of these men who had brought such a wondrous change to their lives. The jailer, meanwhile, sat opposite Paul, his posture still deferential, but now imbued with a quiet dignity, the dignity of a man who had found his true bearings. As they ate, the silence was not awkward, but rather a space filled with unspoken gratitude and burgeoning understanding. The jailer, between spoonfuls of the hearty stew, would occasionally glance at Paul, a question lingering in his eyes, a desire to comprehend the full magnitude of the salvation he had so readily embraced. He had asked, "What must I do to be saved?" And the answer had been simple, yet profound: "Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your household." Now, in the quiet aftermath of that transformative night, the implications of that belief began to unfold, not just in the abstract, but in the tangible reality of his home, his family, his very existence. Silas, sensing the jailer's unspoken thoughts, offered a gentle smile. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, does he not?" he murmured, his voice a soft counterpoint to the clinking of spoons against earthenware. To think that such a night of terror could lead to such a morning of grace. The jailer nodded slowly, his eyes distant for a moment, recalling the shaking earth, the open doors, the drawn sword, and then the calm, unwavering voice of Paul. "Indeed," he replied, his voice a little hoarse with emotion. "I was lost, utterly lost, consumed by fear and despair. I saw no way out, no hope." He paused, looking directly at Paul, his gaze filled with an almost childlike wonder. "And then you spoke, not of escape, but of salvation." It was as if a light had pierced the deepest darkness I had ever known. Paul, his own gaze reflecting a deep compassion, reached across the simple table and gently placed his hand on the jailer's arm. "That light, my friend, is the light of Christ," he said, his voice resonating with a quiet authority that filled the small room. "It is a light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. It is a light that reveals truth, offers hope, and brings freedom, not just from physical bonds, but from the chains of sin and despair that bind the soul." He spoke not with grand pronouncements, but with a gentle conviction, his words weaving a tapestry of understanding for the newly converted family. The jailer's wife, who had been listening intently, now spoke for the first time, her voice soft but clear. "We had read whispers of this of Jesus," she admitted, her eyes cast down for a moment before rising to meet Silas's. "Travelers speak of new teachings, of a God who is not like our Roman gods, who demand sacrifice and fear. But to see it, to feel it, it is entirely different." She gestured vaguely towards her children, who were now finishing their meal, their faces serene. "Our lives were predictable, governed by duty, by custom. But now there is something more. A joy we have never known." Silas, his heart swelling with a quiet joy, understood her words perfectly. He had witnessed this transformation countless times, in various cities and among diverse peoples. The message of Christ, simple yet profound, had the power to transcend cultural barriers, social strata, and personal histories, touching the deepest parts of the human spirit. "It is the promise of a new life," Silas explained, his voice gentle, "a life lived in communion with the divine, a life filled with purpose and hope, no matter the circumstances. It is a freedom that no prison can contain, no emperor can revoke." He looked around the table, at the faces of the jailer and his family, now softened by belief, their eyes reflecting a nascent understanding of the profound journey they had just embarked upon. The meal continued in this vein, a quiet conversation interspersed with moments of reflective silence, each word a thread in the fabric of their new shared faith. Paul and Silas, despite their physical discomfort, felt invigorated by the spiritual feast unfolding before them. They spoke of the teachings of Jesus, of his life, his death, and his resurrection, of the love that compelled him to sacrifice himself for all humanity. They explained the meaning of repentance, of forgiveness, and of the Holy Spirit, who would now dwell within them, guiding and comforting them. The jailer and his family absorbed every word, their minds open, their hearts receptive, like parched earth drinking in the first drops of rain. As the morning progressed, the sun climbing higher in the sky, casting longer shadows across the courtyard, a sense of anticipation began to build. The earthquake, though a terrifying memory, had also been a catalyst, a divine intervention that had shattered not only prison walls but also the spiritual barriers in the jailer's heart. Now, the practicalities of their situation began to surface. Paul and Silas were still prisoners, albeit ones who had brought salvation to their captor. The question of their release, however, remained. The jailer, his earlier joy now tempered with a renewed sense of responsibility, turned to Paul. "My masters, the magistrates, they will surely come to inspect the prison," he began, his brow furrowing slightly. "The earthquake, the damage, it will not go unnoticed. And your escape, or rather, your decision not to escape, it will be a matter of great concern." He spoke with a newfound respect, no longer seeing them merely as criminals, but as men of God, whose presence had irrevocably altered his world. Paul, ever pragmatic, nodded. "Indeed," he affirmed. "We must consider their reaction. But let us not forget, friend, that we are Roman citizens." He spoke the words with a quiet authority, a reminder of the legal protections that still, despite their recent ordeal, afforded them certain rights. Silas, remembering the brutal scourging they had endured without trial, felt a flicker of indignation, but he kept his counsel, trusting Paul's wisdom. The jailer's eyes widened slightly at the mention of their Roman citizenship. It was a detail he had perhaps overlooked in the chaos of the previous night, or perhaps dismissed, given their status as prisoners accused of disturbing the peace. "Roman citizens," he repeated, a note of surprise in his voice. "But you were scourged, without trial." His voice trailed off, a dawning realization of the grave error that had been committed by the magistrates. To scourge a Roman citizen without a proper trial was a serious offense, one that could have severe repercussions for the officials involved. "Precisely," Paul confirmed, his gaze steady. "We were beaten publicly, without a hearing, and then cast into prison. This was an unlawful act, a violation of Roman law." He spoke not with anger, but with a calm assertion of his rights, understanding that this legal point would be crucial in their eventual release and in protecting the nascent Christian community in Philippi. The jailer, a man steeped in Roman law and order, understood the implications immediately. His face, which had been so recently radiating joy, now took on a more serious, almost concerned expression. The magistrates had overstepped their authority, and he, as their subordinate, could potentially face difficulties if this matter were not handled delicately. "This changes things," the jailer murmured, his mind already racing through the potential consequences. "They will not wish this to become public. Such an accusation against Roman officials, it could lead to severe penalties for them. He rose from the table, his earlier weariness returning, though now it was mingled with a strategic concern. I must go to them. I must inform them of this development. It would be best if you remained here, within the safety of my home, until I return. You are no longer prisoners, but guests under my protection. Silas watched the jailer depart, his footsteps echoing softly in the courtyard as he made his way towards the magistrate's quarters. The transformation in the man was truly remarkable, Silas mused. From a terrified official contemplating suicide, to a joyful convert, and now to a protective host, strategizing on behalf of his former prisoners. It was a testament to the profound and immediate impact of the gospel, a seed that had taken root in fertile ground and was already bearing fruit. Paul, sensing Silas's thoughts, offered a small, knowing smile. The Lord works through all things, Silas, even through the intricacies of Roman law, he said, his voice a low rumble. This citizenship, though a worldly privilege, can serve a divine purpose. It will ensure our safe departure and, more importantly, protect the integrity of the message we have brought to Philippi. He leaned back against the wall, a sigh escaping his lips, a sigh of both weariness and profound satisfaction. The pain in his back was still present, a dull throb, but it was overshadowed by the spiritual triumph of the night. As they waited, the jailer's wife, ever attentive, brought them fresh water and clean cloths, gently tending to Paul's wounds. Her touch was soft, her eyes filled with a quiet reverence, a silent expression of her gratitude. Silas watched, deeply moved by this simple act of care, a tangible manifestation of the love that had entered this household. The children, meanwhile, gathered around them, their initial shyness slowly dissipating, replaced by an innocent curiosity. They listened intently as Paul and Silas spoke, not of grand theological concepts, but of simple parables, of stories of Jesus' kindness and compassion, of his healing touch and his boundless love. The children's faces lit up, their imaginations captivated by these tales of a benevolent God, so different from the stern, unapproachable deities of their Roman upbringing. Hours passed in this manner, filled with quiet fellowship, shared stories, and a deepening sense of community. The sun had reached its zenith and begun its slow descent when the jailer finally returned, his face a mixture of relief and lingering concern. He entered the house with a more hurried step, his eyes immediately seeking out Paul and Silas. "The magistrates," he began, his voice a little breathless, "they have sent word. They are alarmed by the news of your Roman citizenship and the unlawful scourging." He paused, taking a deep breath. "They have sent officers to release you and to ask you to leave the city quietly." Silas felt a surge of relief, a loosening of the tension he had not realized he was still holding. Freedom was at hand, not just for them, but for the message they carried. Yet, Paul's expression remained thoughtful, a hint of something more in his eyes. "To release us quietly," Paul repeated, his voice calm, almost reflective. "After they publicly beat us, uncondemned, and cast us into prison? And now they wish to send us away secretly." He shook his head slowly, a subtle but firm disapproval in his gesture. "No, that will not do." The jailer looked confused, perhaps a little apprehensive. "But they wish to avoid trouble, to avoid word of their error reaching higher authorities. He knew the Roman system, the importance of maintaining appearances, of avoiding scandal. Paul, however, had a deeper purpose in mind. They must come themselves, he declared, his voice gaining strength, and lead us out publicly. They wronged us openly, and they must acknowledge their error openly. This is not for our pride, my friend, but for the sake of the gospel, and for the protection of those who will follow us in this city. He understood that a quiet, surreptitious departure would imply guilt, casting a shadow over their mission and potentially endangering the fledgling Christian community in Philippi. A public escort by the magistrates, however, would serve as an official vindication, a clear statement that Paul and Silas were innocent and that their message was not to be suppressed. Silas understood Paul's reasoning immediately. It was a strategic move, born not of arrogance, but of wisdom. It would establish a precedent, a clear message to any who might seek to persecute the new believers in Philippi, that such actions would not go unchallenged. The jailer, after a moment of contemplation, grasped the gravity of Paul's demand. He saw the wisdom in it, the protection it offered. He nodded, his resolve firm. "I will convey your message," he said, his voice now resolute. "They will understand the implications." And with that, he departed once more, his steps now more purposeful, a man acting not out of fear, but out of a newfound conviction. The wait that followed was shorter this time, filled with a quiet anticipation. The sun was beginning to dip towards the western horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, when the jailer returned, accompanied by 2 Roman officers. Behind them, their faces etched with a mixture of chagrin and forced civility, were the very magistrates who had ordered Paul and Silas's scourging and imprisonment. The magistrates, their tunics crisp and their expressions carefully neutral, approached Paul and Silas with an air of reluctant deference. Their earlier arrogance had been replaced by a palpable unease, a clear acknowledgement of the precarious position they found themselves in. "We have come," one of them began, his voice stiff, "to escort you from the prison. We ask that you depart the city peacefully." His words were an attempt to maintain a semblance of authority, but the underlying tone was one of appeasement. Paul, his gaze steady and unwavering, looked directly at them. "You beat us publicly, without a trial, though we are Roman citizens, and threw us into prison," he stated, his voice calm, yet firm, recounting the injustice with precise clarity. "And now you want to send us away secretly? No. Let them come themselves and lead us out." His words hung in the air, a quiet challenge that could not be ignored. The magistrates exchanged uneasy glances. They knew the law, and they knew the potential consequences of their actions. To refuse Paul's demand would be to risk a formal complaint to higher Roman authorities, a complaint that could easily cost them their positions, if not worse. The public humiliation of admitting their error was a small price to pay compared to the potential ruin of their careers. With a sigh of resignation, the senior magistrate stepped forward, his face a mask of forced politeness. "We regret the misunderstanding," he stated, his voice devoid of genuine warmth, yet undeniably apologetic in its intent. "We will personally escort you from the city gates, and we ask that you leave Philippi in peace." It was a public acknowledgement of their wrongdoing, a concession that would serve to protect the nascent Christian community from further arbitrary persecution. Silas watched the scene unfold, a profound sense of satisfaction settling over him. Justice, in its own way, had been served. Not through vengeance, but through the quiet assertion of rights, and ultimately, through the power of a message that transcended human law. The magistrates, once instruments of oppression, were now unwitting instruments of the gospel's protection. As the sun cast long, golden shadows across the city, Paul and Silas, accompanied by the magistrates and the jailer, walked through the streets of Philippi. They were no longer prisoners, but men of dignity, their heads held high. The citizens who saw them must have wondered at the sight, the very magistrates who had condemned them now escorting them with an air of respect, almost deference. It was a powerful, silent testimony to the unseen forces at work, to the God who could shake the earth and humble the powerful. Their final stop before leaving the city was the home of Lydia, the first convert in Philippi, where they found the other believers gathered, anxiously awaiting news. The sight of Paul and Silas, free and unharmed, brought a wave of relief and joy to the small congregation. They shared their experiences, recounting the miraculous earthquake, the conversion of the jailer and his household, and the magistrate's reluctant concession. The believers listened, their hearts swelling with awe and gratitude, their faith strengthened by these extraordinary events. Silas, looking at the faces of these new believers, felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been arduous, filled with pain and uncertainty, but the harvest had been rich. He saw the seeds of faith taking root in Philippi, a community forged in adversity, bound by a shared belief, and protected by divine intervention. This small gathering, meeting in Lydia's home, was the beginning of something profound, a beacon of light in a Roman city. After a time of fellowship, prayer, and encouragement, Paul and Silas prepared to depart. They embraced the jailer and his family, their farewells filled with a quiet affection, a bond forged in the crucible of a miraculous night. The jailer, his eyes shining with unshed tears, promised to nurture the faith in his household and to share the message with others. His transformation was complete, a testament to the enduring power of grace. As Paul and Silas walked out of the city gates, leaving Philippi behind, the evening air was cool and still. The stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, twinkling like distant promises. They left behind a city irrevocably changed, not by political decree or military might, but by the quiet, persistent power of faith, by midnight songs, earthquake chains, and a jailer who found salvation. The journey ahead was long, but the memory of Philippi, of the transformed household and the burgeoning community of believers, would serve as a powerful reminder of the boundless grace that could turn adversity into triumph and despair into profound, enduring hope. The echoes of their midnight songs, though no longer audible, would forever reverberate through the heart of that city, a timeless melody of redemption and new beginnings. The first rays of dawn, pale and hesitant, began to filter through the narrow, grimy window slits high up in the prison wall, casting long, distorted shadows across the rough stone floor where Paul and Silas had spent the long, eventful night. The air, still thick with the lingering scent of damp earth and fear, now carried a faint, almost imperceptible hint of morning chill, a stark contrast to the spiritual warmth that had enveloped the jailer's household just hours before. Paul, his body still aching from the brutal scourging and the confinement in the stocks, felt a quiet sense of vindication settle over him, a deep, unwavering certainty that divine purpose had been served in the most unexpected and profound ways. He watched the jailer, now a brother in faith, moving with a newfound lightness in his step, preparing a simple meal for them, his face etched with a peace that transcended the harsh realities of their surroundings. Silas, seated beside Paul, leaned against the cold stone, his eyes closed in a moment of silent reflection, the memory of their midnight hymn still resonating within him, a testament to the power that had shaken not only the prison foundations but also the very hearts of men. The morning hours unfolded with a quiet, almost domestic rhythm, a stark departure from the chaos and terror of the previous night. The jailer, his earlier fear replaced by a fervent devotion, attended to their needs with a tenderness that spoke volumes of his transformed spirit, bringing them fresh water and a meager breakfast of bread and dried fruit, a gesture of hospitality that felt profoundly sacred within the confines of the Roman prison. He spoke in hushed, reverent tones of his family's joy, of the profound peace that had settled over his home, a peace he had never known in his years of service to Caesar, a peace that had blossomed from the very depths of their shared suffering. Paul listened, a gentle smile playing on his lips, his gaze distant, already contemplating the next steps, the intricate dance of divine will and human action that would guide their path forward. He knew, with an unshakable conviction, that their work in Philippi was far from over, despite the physical chains that had bound them and the legal injustices that had been wrought against them. As the sun climbed higher, painting the eastern sky with soft hues of rose and gold, the heavy wooden door to their cell creaked open, revealing a centurion, his face impassive, his armor gleaming dully in the dim light. He carried an air of official urgency, his presence a stark reminder of the Roman authority that still held sway over their immediate fate. "The magistrates have sent officers to release you," he announced, his voice devoid of emotion, a mere conduit for the orders of his superiors. Paul and Silas exchanged a knowing glance, a silent acknowledgement of the unfolding divine plan. The centurion then gestured for them to follow, leading them through the labyrinthine corridors of the prison, the familiar clanking of keys and the distant murmur of other prisoners a stark backdrop to their quiet procession. The air outside felt crisp and cool against their skin, a welcome balm after the stagnant prison atmosphere, and the sounds of the bustling city, though still muted by the early hour, began to drift towards them, a symphony of daily life resuming its course. They were led not directly to freedom, but to a waiting room within the prison complex, a slightly less austere space with a small, barred window looking out onto a narrow courtyard. Here, two lictors, the magistrate's attendants, stood stiffly, their fasces, bundles of rods symbolizing Roman authority, held upright, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and official detachment. One of them, a man with a neatly trimmed beard and sharp, assessing eyes, stepped forward, his voice carefully neutral, almost apologetic. "The magistrates send word that you are to be released. They bid you go in peace." He avoided Paul's gaze, his words delivered with a practiced formality that barely concealed an underlying discomfort. Paul, however, did not miss the subtle shift in their demeanor, the cautious respect that had replaced the earlier contempt. He knew the wheels of Roman justice, however slow and often unjust, had begun to turn in their favor, propelled by a force far greater than any earthly decree. Paul, his posture still regal despite the lingering pain, met the lictor's gaze with an unwavering intensity, his voice clear and resonant, carrying the weight of his Roman citizenship, a fact that had been deliberately overlooked in their hasty condemnation. "They have beaten us publicly, without a trial, though we are Roman citizens, and have thrown us into prison," he declared, his words echoing slightly in the small room, each syllable imbued with a quiet, unyielding authority. "And now do they want to send us away secretly? No. Let them come themselves and bring us out." His statement hung in the air, a challenge to the very foundation of their unjust actions, a demand for the due process that had been so flagrantly denied. Silas, standing beside him, felt a surge of admiration for Paul's courage, his strategic mind, and his unwavering commitment to justice, not just for themselves, but for the principle of fair treatment under Roman law. The lictors exchanged uneasy glances, their faces betraying a dawning realization of the gravity of Paul's words, the potential legal repercussions for the magistrates who had so carelessly abused their power. The lictors, visibly perturbed by Paul's assertion of Roman citizenship and his demand for public redress, quickly departed, their earlier composure now fractured by a palpable sense of alarm. They understood the severe implications of such an accusation. Roman law was clear on the rights of its citizens, and the public scourging and imprisonment of a Roman citizen without trial was a grave offense, one that could lead to significant penalties for the magistrates themselves, potentially even ruin. The thought of facing the wrath of higher Roman authorities, of being stripped of their positions and prestige, undoubtedly sent a shiver of fear through their official ranks. Paul watched them go, a quiet satisfaction settling in his heart, not of vengeance, but of justice being meticulously, divinely orchestrated. He knew that this strategic move was not merely about their personal freedom, but about establishing a precedent, about demonstrating the power of truth and the inviolability of human dignity, even in the face of arbitrary authority. A short while later, the heavy footsteps of multiple men echoed down the corridor, growing steadily louder until the magistrates themselves, two stern-faced Roman officials, appeared at the entrance of the waiting room, their usual pomp and self-assured demeanor noticeably absent. Their faces, usually composed and authoritative, were now etched with a mixture of concern and thinly veiled apprehension. They were men accustomed to giving orders, not receiving them, and certainly not to being called to account by prisoners they had so casually condemned. The air in the room thickened with unspoken tension, a silent battle of wills between the unjustly accused and their now fearful accusers. Paul and Silas stood their ground, their expressions calm and resolute, their presence radiating a quiet strength that seemed to disarm the magistrates more effectively than any shouted protest. The senior magistrate, a man named Lucius, his toga slightly askew, cleared his throat, his voice, usually booming with authority, now noticeably subdued, almost deferential. We have been informed of your Roman citizenship," he began, his gaze flickering nervously between Paul and Silas, avoiding direct eye contact. "We acted hastily, in the heat of the moment, to quell the disturbance." His words were a clumsy attempt at an apology, a transparent effort to mitigate the serious legal error they had committed. The other magistrate, Quintus, a younger man with a more rigid countenance, merely nodded in agreement, his discomfort evident in the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. They were clearly humbled, their civic pride wounded, their authority undermined by their own imprudence. The strategic assertiveness of Paul's earlier declaration had struck its intended mark, forcing these powerful men to confront the consequences of their unjust actions. "We regret the distress this has caused," Lucius continued, his voice barely above a murmur, a stark contrast to the public condemnation they had issued just the day before. He then offered a formal, if somewhat reluctant, apology for their mistreatment, a concession that spoke volumes about the fear of Roman law and the potential repercussions they now faced. "We have come to personally escort you from the prison," he stated, a clear indication of their desire to rectify their mistake and avoid any further legal entanglements. The sight of these proud Roman officials, who had ordered their public humiliation, now standing before them, offering apologies and requesting their departure, was a powerful testament to the unexpected turns of divine intervention. Silas, observing the magistrate's discomfort, felt a quiet sense of vindication, a profound understanding that justice, though sometimes slow, often found its way through the most intricate and unforeseen paths. Paul, his gaze steady and unwavering, allowed a moment of silence to hang in the air, letting the weight of their apology settle, letting the full measure of their regret sink in. He understood the importance of this moment, not just for their immediate freedom, but for the nascent Christian community in Philippi. To leave quietly, as if slinking away in shame, would undermine their standing and the message they carried. They had been publicly wronged, and their vindication, too, needed to be acknowledged, if not publicly celebrated, then at least formally recognized by the very authorities who had condemned them. "We will leave," Paul finally stated, his voice calm and measured, devoid of triumph or malice, "but not before we have ensured the well-being of those we have come to serve." He knew that their departure, while necessary, must be handled with wisdom and care, ensuring that the new believers in the city were not left vulnerable or disheartened. With an air of cautious deference, the magistrates then led Paul and Silas out of the prison, their footsteps echoing through the now empty corridors that had witnessed so much suffering and so much miraculous intervention. The heavy iron gate, which had clanged shut with such finality the previous evening, now swung open with a surprisingly soft creak, revealing the bustling streets of Philippi, alive with the sounds of morning commerce and the vibrant energy of a Roman colony awakening. The sunlight, now brighter and warmer, felt like a blessing on their faces, a tangible symbol of their newfound freedom. The magistrates, still visibly anxious, continued to walk ahead, their hurried pace betraying their eagerness to see Paul and Silas safely out of the city and to put this embarrassing incident behind them. Paul, however, had no intention of departing immediately. His mission in Philippi was not yet complete, and the new believers, particularly Lydia and the jailer's household, needed further instruction and encouragement. He turned to the magistrates, a polite but firm expression on his face. "We cannot simply depart without first visiting our hosts," he stated, his voice calm but resolute. "We must encourage the brethren." The magistrates, though clearly wishing for their swift and discreet departure, understood the implicit demand in Paul's words. To refuse would only prolong their uncomfortable interaction and potentially invite further scrutiny. With a resigned nod, they agreed, their faces a mixture of frustration and continued apprehension, and directed their lictors to accompany Paul and Silas to Lydia's house, a silent escort that underscored their official capitulation. The walk through the city streets, under the watchful eyes of the lictors, was a strange blend of public spectacle and quiet determination. Paul and Silas, though still bearing the marks of their ordeal, walked with an unbowed dignity that belied their recent imprisonment. The people they passed, many of whom had witnessed their public scourging, now looked on with a mixture of curiosity and confusion, perhaps sensing the unusual circumstances of their release, the subtle shift in the balance of power. The air was filled with the familiar smells of the marketplace, to fresh bread, spices, and the earthy scent of the nearby river, to a sensory tapestry that grounded them in the reality of their mission. Silas, walking beside Paul, felt a profound sense of gratitude, a quiet triumph that transcended the physical pain and the lingering fatigue. The memory of their midnight songs, of the earthquake and the jailer's transformation, now intertwined with the sight of the humbled magistrates, formed a powerful narrative of divine intervention and unwavering faith. Upon reaching Lydia's house, the lictors remained outside, their presence a silent testimony to the magistrates' lingering anxiety and their desire to ensure Paul and Silas's eventual departure. Inside, a wave of relief and joy washed over the small gathering of believers. Lydia, her face radiant with a mixture of concern and profound gratitude, rushed to embrace them, her eyes welling with tears of joy. The jailer and his family were also present, their faces alight with a newfound spiritual fervor, their transformation a living testament to the power of the gospel. The atmosphere in Lydia's home was one of overwhelming warmth and fellowship, a stark contrast to the cold, oppressive stone of the prison they had just left. Paul and Silas sat among them, sharing stories of the miraculous events of the previous night, their words filled with an unshakable conviction and a deep, abiding love for their newfound brethren. Paul, his voice gentle but firm, then offered words of encouragement and instruction, reinforcing the core tenets of their faith, preparing them for the challenges that lay ahead. He spoke of resilience in the face of adversity, of the enduring power of prayer, and of the unwavering hope found in their shared belief. He reminded them that their faith was not a shield against suffering, but a source of strength within it, a beacon that would guide them through the darkest of times. Silas, his heart overflowing with emotion, added his own words of comfort and exhortation, his quiet strength a steadying presence among the eager listeners. He spoke of the importance of community, of supporting one another, and of spreading the message of hope and redemption to their fellow Philippians, transforming their city from within. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long, golden shadows across Lydia's courtyard, Paul and Silas knew their time in Philippi, for now, had come to an end. The magistrates' request for their departure, though initially resisted, now served a strategic purpose, allowing them to move on to new territories, to continue spreading the message of the gospel. With heartfelt farewells and promises to return, they embraced their new brothers and sisters in Christ, leaving behind a burgeoning community of believers, a testament to the transformative power of their mission. The memory of Philippi, of the midnight songs, the earthquake, the humbled magistrates, and the jailer who found faith, would forever be etched in their hearts, a powerful reminder of the boundless grace that could turn adversity into triumph and despair into profound, enduring hope. The echoes of their midnight songs, though no longer audible, would forever reverberate through the heart of that city, a timeless melody of redemption and new beginnings, a quiet triumph that would continue to inspire generations. The morning sun, a pale, hesitant disk, finally climbed above the eastern hills, casting long, watery shadows across the cobbled streets of Philippi. Its gentle light, usually a herald of bustling activity, now seemed to fall upon a city still caught in the lingering hush of an extraordinary night. The magistrates, their faces etched with a mixture of exhaustion and profound unease, had spent the pre-dawn hours grappling with the bewildering events that had unfolded within their prison walls. The reports had been astounding, almost unbelievable: an earthquake, a prison miraculously opened, and yet no prisoners escaped. Instead, the very men they had unjustly scourged and incarcerated were found ministering to their jailer, a man now utterly transformed. The implications of such a divine intervention, coupled with the revelation of Paul and Silas's Roman citizenship, weighed heavily upon their minds, threatening to unravel the very fabric of their carefully constructed authority. They dispatched their lictors, the official attendants bearing the fasces, with urgent instructions to the prison. These men, usually symbols of Roman power and order, now moved with an uncharacteristic diffidence, their steps muted by the early morning quiet. They approached the prison gates, which stood ajar, a silent testament to the night's upheaval. Inside, they found the jailer, his face still bearing the marks of his recent terror and subsequent spiritual awakening, yet now radiating a quiet, profound peace. He listened to their relayed message, his eyes holding a depth of understanding that transcended mere official pronouncements. The magistrates, through their lictors, had ordered Paul and Silas to be released, urging them to depart the city quietly and without further disturbance. Paul, ever the strategist and guardian of the fledgling Christian community, received the message with a thoughtful nod. He understood the magistrates' desire to avoid public scandal, to sweep the embarrassing incident under the rug of official silence. However, he also recognized the importance of establishing the innocence of the gospel message, of demonstrating that their faith was not a subversive cult to be tolerated only in the shadows. He turned to the lictors, his voice calm but firm, resonating with an authority that surprised even himself. "They beat us publicly without a trial, men who are Roman citizens, and threw us into prison," he declared, his words echoing slightly in the damp stone corridor. "And now they want to get rid of us quietly. No. Let them come themselves and escort us out." Silas watched his companion, a quiet admiration shining in his eyes. Paul's resolve was not born of pride, but of a deep conviction that the truth must be honored, that the nascent church in Philippi needed to see its founders vindicated, not merely dismissed. The lictors, taken aback by Paul's unexpected demand, hesitated for a moment, then quickly retreated to convey this new, unwelcome message to their superiors. The magistrates, upon hearing Paul's refusal, felt a fresh wave of consternation wash over them. The thought of appearing before these men, whom they had so recently abused, filled them with a profound sense of shame and fear. Their Roman pride, usually an unyielding fortress, now crumbled under the weight of their own injustice and the unexpected revelation of Paul's citizenship. With heavy hearts and a palpable sense of humiliation, the magistrates themselves made their way to the prison. The walk felt longer than usual, each step a testament to their fallen dignity. When they finally stood before Paul and Silas, their usual imperiousness was gone, replaced by a strained deference. They offered their apologies, their words stilted and formal, yet carrying the undeniable weight of genuine regret. They pleaded with Paul and Silas to leave the city, not as prisoners, but as respected, though still inconvenient, guests. It was a remarkable reversal of fortune, a testament to the power of truth and divine intervention. Paul and Silas, their faces reflecting a quiet dignity, accepted the apology. They had no desire for vengeance, only for justice and the unimpeded spread of the gospel. Before departing the prison, they turned to the jailer and his family, their faces alight with a shared joy and understanding. The jailer, his eyes still brimming with the wonder of his newfound faith, embraced them warmly, his gratitude a tangible presence in the cold stone cell. His family, gathered around him, offered their heartfelt thanks, their voices soft with reverence. It was a tender, private moment, a quiet benediction before they stepped back into the world. From the prison, their first destination was not the city gates, but the welcoming home of Lydia. The journey through the waking city felt different now. The early morning air, once oppressive, now carried a crisp, clean scent. The sounds of the city, the distant cries of vendors, the clatter of a cart, seemed to hum with a new kind of energy. They walked with a quiet purpose, their steps lighter than they had been upon their arrival in Philippi. Lydia's home, a sanctuary of warmth and hospitality, offered a much-needed respite. As they approached, the scent of freshly baked bread and brewing herbs wafted from within, a comforting aroma after the stale air of the prison. The door opened before they even reached it, and Lydia herself stood framed in the doorway, her face alight with an immense relief and joy. Her eyes, usually so keen and observant, now held a softness, a maternal concern for these men who had brought such profound change into her life. She embraced them both, a silent testament to the deep bond of faith that now connected them. Inside, the small gathering of believers, the nascent church of Philippi, awaited them. Their faces, a mixture of anxiety and hope, brightened considerably at the sight of Paul and Silas. There was the jailer and his family, their presence a living testimony to the night's miracles. There were the women who had gathered by the river, their faces radiant with a quiet devotion. They sat together, a small but fervent community, sharing a simple meal, their hearts overflowing with gratitude. Paul and Silas recounted the events of the night, not with boastfulness, but with a profound sense of awe at God's unfathomable grace. They spoke of the midnight songs, the earthquake that had shaken the very foundations of the prison, yet had left them unharmed. They spoke of the jailer's despair and his subsequent transformation, his heart open to the truth. Each word resonated with a quiet power, strengthening the faith of those gathered, weaving the extraordinary events into the tapestry of their shared spiritual journey. Lydia listened intently, her gaze moving between Paul and Silas, her heart swelling with pride for this fledgling community. Her home, once merely a place of commerce and comfort, had become a vital hub for the burgeoning Christian movement in Europe, a testament to her courageous hospitality. Paul, ever mindful of the spiritual nourishment of the new believers, offered words of encouragement, his voice gentle yet firm. He reminded them of the enduring power of their faith, even in the face of adversity. He spoke of the freedom that came not from the absence of chains, but from the liberation of the Spirit. He urged them to remain steadfast, to continue to gather, to support one another, and to spread the message of hope and redemption throughout Philippi. Silas, his presence a steady anchor, added his own quiet affirmations, his eyes reflecting the deep peace that comes from unwavering conviction. he emphasized the importance of their shared worship, reminding them that even in the darkest hours, their songs had ascended to heaven, bringing forth a miraculous response. As the morning progressed, a quiet serenity settled over the gathering. Paul and Silas knew their time in Philippi was drawing to a close. Their mission called them onward, to other cities, other souls waiting to hear the message. The farewell was not one of sorrow, but of resolute purpose. Lydia, ever practical and generous, had prepared provisions for their journey, ensuring they would not travel hungry or without comfort. She stood by the door, her eyes glistening, as Paul and Silas prepared to depart. "You will always have a home here," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "and a family who loves you." Her words were a balm, a promise of enduring connection. Paul turned to the assembled believers, his gaze sweeping over each face, imprinting their images upon his memory. "Hold fast to the truth," he urged them, his voice filled with a paternal affection. "Leave lives worthy of the gospel, and let your light shine brightly in this city." He embraced Lydia, a gesture of profound gratitude and respect for her unwavering support. Then, with Silas by his side, they stepped out of the warmth of her home and into the bustling streets of Philippi. The city was now fully awake, its daily rhythm reasserting itself. Merchants called out their wares, chariots rumbled over the cobblestones, and the scent of market spices mingled with the aroma of wood smoke. Yet, for Paul and Silas, the city held a different resonance now. It was no longer merely a Roman colony, but a place where the seeds of faith had been sown, watered with suffering, and brought forth a miraculous harvest. They walked towards the city gate, their departure marked not by fanfare, but by a quiet dignity. The magistrates, true to their word, had ensured their unhindered passage, their presence a subtle acknowledgement of the previous night's extraordinary events. As they passed through the grand archway of the city gate, Paul paused, turning to look back at Philippi. The sun, now higher in the sky, illuminated the city's impressive Roman architecture, its temples and forums, its bustling marketplace. He saw not just the physical structures, but the faces of the people they had met, the demon-possessed girl now free, the jailer and his family transformed, and Lydia, the steadfast foundation of the new church. A profound sense of peace settled over him, a quiet satisfaction that transcended the pain of the scourging and the confinement. They had left behind not just a memory of midnight songs and miraculous earthquakes, but a living, breathing community of faith, a beacon of hope in the heart of Macedonia. Silas stood beside him, his gaze also fixed on the receding city. He remembered the cold, damp prison, the clanking chains, the despair that had threatened to engulf them. But he also remembered the power of their shared worship, the joy that had filled their hearts even in the deepest darkness, and the miraculous intervention that had shattered their bonds. Philippi, for him, would forever be a testament to resilience, to the enduring power of prayer, and to the transformative grace of God. The physical chains had been broken, but more importantly, spiritual chains had been cast off, freeing hearts and minds. Their journey continued, but the spirit of Philippi, of the midnight songs, the earthquake, the humbled magistrates, and the jailer who found faith, would forever be etched in their hearts, a powerful reminder of the boundless grace that could turn adversity into triumph and despair into profound, enduring hope. The echoes of their midnight songs, though no longer audible, would forever reverberate through the heart of that city, a timeless melody of redemption and new beginnings, a quiet triumph that would continue to inspire generations. They carried with them not only the dust of Philippi on their sandals, but the indelible mark of its transformation in their souls, a testament to the enduring legacy of faith planted in the most unexpected of places, destined to blossom and spread its light across the world. The road ahead was long, filled with unknown challenges and untold opportunities, but they walked it with an unwavering resolve, their hearts full of the quiet certainty that their mission, though arduous, was profoundly blessed, and that the seeds they had sown in Philippi would yield an abundant harvest for years to come. The morning light, pale and hesitant, began to filter through the narrow, high windows of the jailer's home, painting the rough-hewn wooden beams with a soft, golden glow, a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness that had so recently enveloped their lives. Paul and Silas, their bodies still bearing the faint ache of the stocks and the lingering chill of the prison air, sat at a simple, sturdy table, sharing a meal that was both humble and profoundly significant. The jailer, now transformed by the dawn of a new understanding, watched them with an expression of deep reverence, his face etched with a quiet awe that spoke volumes of the night's miraculous events. His family, gathered around, their eyes wide with a mixture of wonder and nascent faith, listened intently as Paul, with a gentle, resonant voice, spoke of the boundless grace that had found them all within the confines of that very house. The air, once thick with the scent of fear and despair, now carried the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread and warm milk, a simple feast that tasted sweeter than any luxury, for it was seasoned with gratitude and the profound joy of newfound fellowship. Paul recounted the story of Jesus, not as a distant deity, but as a living presence, a source of unwavering strength and unconditional love, whose message transcended the walls of any prison, any city, any earthly empire. Silas, his gaze steady and kind, nodded in agreement, occasionally adding a detail or a heartfelt affirmation, his voice a soothing counterpoint to Paul's more impassioned delivery. The jailer, whose name, though unrecorded in history's grand tapestry, was now indelibly etched in the hearts of these apostles, listened with an open heart, his earlier terror replaced by a profound peace that settled deep within his soul, a peace he had never known existed. As the sun climbed higher, casting longer shadows across the courtyard, a messenger arrived from the city magistrates, his face a mask of urgency and thinly veiled apprehension. He delivered their official decree, a terse command for Paul and Silas to depart the city quietly and without further incident. The magistrates, having learned of the earthquake and the subsequent chaos, and perhaps fearing further divine retribution or civil unrest, wished only for the troublesome preachers to vanish from their sight, hoping to restore the fragile order of their Roman colony. Paul, however, his eyes alight with a shrewd understanding of Roman law and a righteous indignation at the injustice they had suffered, refused to be dismissed so easily. He declared that as Roman citizens, they had been unlawfully beaten and imprisoned without trial, a grave violation of their rights, and demanded that the magistrates themselves come and escort them out, acknowledging their error. The messenger, visibly startled by Paul's unexpected defiance, hurried back to the city center, his sandals slapping against the cobblestones, to relay Paul's powerful assertion of citizenship. The magistrates, upon hearing this, were seized by a sudden, chilling fear. To flog a Roman citizen was a serious offense, punishable by law, and to do so without trial was an act of egregious injustice that could bring severe repercussions from higher authorities. The gravity of their mistake weighed heavily upon them, transforming their earlier arrogance into a desperate desire to rectify their blunder before it escalated into a scandal. They knew they had underestimated these men, these unassuming preachers who carried a power far greater than any earthly legion. Soon, the magistrates themselves, their faces pale and their demeanor humbled, arrived at the jailer's house, their official robes seeming to hang heavier upon their shoulders. They approached Paul and Silas with a newfound deference, their voices tinged with apology as they respectfully pleaded with them to leave the city, to spare them further embarrassment and potential legal ramifications. It was a remarkable reversal of fortune, a testament to the quiet authority that resided within these men of faith, an authority that transcended the temporal power of Rome. Paul and Silas, having made their point and asserted the dignity of their mission, agreed to depart, but not before offering a final, profound gesture of love and solidarity. They returned to the home of Lydia, the purple cloth dealer, whose heart had been the first to open to their message in Philippi, and whose house had become a sanctuary for the nascent Christian community. There, they found the believers gathered, their faces etched with concern and relief, their prayers having ascended like incense throughout the long, tumultuous night. Paul and Silas, their spirits renewed by the sight of their spiritual family, shared the full account of the earthquake, the jailer's conversion, and the magistrate's humbling apology. Their words resonated with an undeniable power, strengthening the faith of the young church, assuring them that even in the darkest hours, divine providence was at work, weaving a tapestry of grace and redemption. Paul, ever the shepherd, offered words of encouragement and instruction, reminding them of the enduring truth of the gospel, urging them to stand firm in their faith, to love one another, and to continue spreading the message of hope and salvation throughout the city. Silas, his voice gentle yet firm, echoed these sentiments, his presence a calming balm to their anxious hearts. The believers, their eyes shining with renewed conviction, understood that their journey of faith had only just begun, and that the seed sown in Philippi would indeed grow into a mighty tree, its branches reaching out to embrace a world yearning for light. As the morning wore on, the time for their departure finally arrived. Paul and Silas, after heartfelt farewells and promises to return, walked through the city gates, not as disgraced prisoners, but as emissaries of a higher kingdom, their steps firm and purposeful. The bustling streets of Philippi, now bathed in the warm glow of the rising sun, seemed to hum with a different energy, a subtle shift in the spiritual landscape, a quiet echo of the faith that had taken root within its walls. They left behind a transformed jailer, a burgeoning community of believers, and a city forever marked by the midnight songs and the earthquake that had shattered more than just prison chains. Their path led them eastward, towards Amphipolis and Apollonia, and then onward to Thessalonica, their mission continuing with an unwavering resolve, their hearts full of the quiet certainty that their arduous journey was profoundly blessed, and that the seeds they had sown in Philippi would yield an abundant harvest for years to come. The world, vast and ancient, stretched before them, an endless canvas awaiting the brushstrokes of their unwavering faith. As they walked, the distant hills of Macedonia, cloaked in a soft, ethereal mist, seemed to cradle the quiet echoes of their midnight songs, carrying them on the gentle morning breeze, a testament to the enduring power of a faith that could move mountains and set souls free, leaving behind a world slowly, beautifully, settling into a profound and peaceful stillness. As Paul and Silas walked away from Philippi, the morning sun, still low and golden, began to paint the eastern sky with hues of rose and lavender, casting long, ethereal shadows behind them as they journeyed along the ancient Aegean Way, a meticulously paved Roman road that stretched like a sinew across the vast Macedonian landscape, connecting distant cities with an impressive network of commerce and culture. The air, crisp and clean after the night's dramatic events, carried the faint scent of pine from the surrounding hills and the distant murmur of a river, a soothing counterpoint to the profound quiet that had settled between the two apostles, a quiet born not of exhaustion, but of a shared, deep understanding of the miraculous intervention they had just witnessed and the profound implications it held for their mission. Silas, his gaze fixed on the receding silhouette of Philippi, a city now bathed in the soft light of dawn, felt a profound sense of wonder mingling with a quiet sorrow, for though they had left behind a transformed jailer and a nascent community of believers, the memory of the slave girl, now free from her torment, and the bewildered magistrates, still grappling with the ramifications of their hasty judgment, lingered in his thoughts like the fading echoes of a dream. He recalled the palpable fear in the jailer's eyes, swiftly replaced by an overwhelming joy, and the almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere of the prison, from one of despair to one of unexpected hope, a testament to the boundless grace that had flowed through their suffering. The physical discomfort of their recent imprisonment, the chafing of the stocks, the cold dampness of the stone cell, had already begun to recede, replaced by the warmth of a spiritual triumph that transcended any earthly pain, leaving an indelible mark upon his soul. Paul, ever the pragmatist, yet deeply moved by the spiritual currents that had swept through Philippi, walked with a deliberate pace, his mind already turning towards the next leg of their journey, towards Thessalonica, a bustling port city known for its strategic importance and its diverse population, a fertile ground for the seeds of the gospel. He considered the intricate tapestry of events, the prophetic vision that had called them to Macedonia, the unexpected opposition, the miraculous deliverance, and the subsequent conversions, seeing in each thread the guiding hand of the divine, meticulously weaving a path that defied human logic and expectation. He knew that each new city would present its own unique challenges, its own blend of skepticism and receptivity, but he carried within him an unshakable conviction, a quiet fire that burned brightly even in the face of uncertainty, that the message they bore was not merely words, but a living, transformative power capable of reshaping hearts and societies. As they continued their journey, the Aegean Way, a marvel of Roman engineering, unfolded before them, a broad, well-maintained thoroughfare paved with large, flat stones, flanked by occasional milestones that marked the distance to distant imperial centers, and sometimes by small shrines dedicated to various Roman deities, their weathered facades bearing silent witness to the passage of countless travelers. The landscape around them gradually shifted from the fertile plains surrounding Philippi to more undulating terrain, dotted with olive groves and vineyards, their leaves shimmering silver and green in the growing light, and occasionally, small, rustic farmhouses, their smoke curling lazily into the morning sky. They passed other travelers, merchants leading laden donkeys, Roman soldiers marching in disciplined formations, and local villagers heading to market, their faces etched with the daily concerns of their lives, each encounter a fleeting glimpse into the vibrant tapestry of provincial Roman life. A quiet moment unfolded as they paused beside a clear, gurgling stream that tumbled down from the nearby hills, its waters cool and refreshing, offering a welcome respite from the dust of the road. Paul knelt, cupping his hands to drink, the simple act a profound pleasure after the parched confines of the prison, and Silas, sitting on a smooth, sun-warmed rock, watched the water flow, its ceaseless motion a gentle reminder of the unstoppable current of their mission. "The Lord's timing is always perfect, Silas," Paul murmured, his voice soft, almost a whisper, as he looked out at the vast expanse of the Macedonian countryside, his eyes reflecting a deep, contemplative peace. Even when we cannot perceive the path, His hand guides us through the darkest valleys and over the highest mountains, turning adversity into an unexpected blessing. Silas nodded slowly, picking up a smooth, grey pebble and turning it over in his fingers, feeling its cool weight. "Indeed, Paul." The night in Philippi felt like an eternity, yet in hindsight, it was but a single, crucial moment, a crucible in which faith was forged and lives were irrevocably changed, not just ours, but the jailer's and his entire household. He remembered the shared hymns, their voices echoing in the oppressive darkness, a defiant melody against the cold stone, and the strange, exhilarating sensation as the earth trembled beneath them, not with destructive fury, but with a liberating force that shattered their bonds and opened the prison doors. The memory was vivid, almost tactile, a testament to the tangible presence of the divine in their midst, a force that defied all human understanding and expectation. Paul then spoke of the profound implications of their recent experience, not just for the individual souls they had touched, but for the broader mission of spreading the gospel throughout the Roman world, a mission that often seemed daunting in its scope and perilous in its execution. Every trial, every moment of suffering, becomes a testimony, Silas, a living sermon that speaks louder than any words we could utter from a pulpit, demonstrating the authentic power of the message we carry, a power that transcends human limitations and worldly authority. He envisioned the ripple effect of their actions, how the story of their miraculous deliverance would undoubtedly spread through Philippi, carried by word of mouth, transforming fear into wonder, and skepticism into a nascent curiosity about the God who could shake foundations and set captives free. Their journey continued, the sun climbing higher in the sky, casting a warmer, more direct light upon the landscape, revealing the intricate details of the flora and fauna that thrived along the roadside. Lizards, quick as thought, darted across the warm stones, and colorful wildflowers, resilient and vibrant, pushed through cracks in the ancient pavement, their delicate petals swaying gently in the subtle breeze. The air grew warmer, carrying the earthy scent of dry soil and distant vegetation, and the rhythmic crunch of their sandals on the gravelly sections of the road became a meditative sound, a steady beat accompanying their thoughts. They spoke little for a time, each lost in their own reflections, yet bound by an unspoken camaraderie, a deep spiritual bond forged in shared hardship and shared triumph. As they approached the small town of Amphipolis, a significant Roman administrative center situated on the Strymon River, the landscape began to flatten out, giving way to more expansive fields of grain, their golden heads swaying like a gentle sea in the breeze, promising a bountiful harvest. The distant site of Amphipolis, with its defensive walls and the glint of sun on its tiled roofs, signaled a temporary reprieve from the open road, a place where they might find sustenance and perhaps a quiet inn for the night. Amphipolis, founded by Athenians in the 5th century BC, held a strategic position, controlling the passage between Macedonia and Thrace, and its port on the Strymon River provided access to the Aegean Sea, making it a bustling hub of trade and communication, a crossroads of cultures and ideas. The atmosphere within Amphipolis was noticeably different from the Romanized order of Philippi. Here, the Hellenistic influence was more pronounced, with Greek architecture blending seamlessly with Roman structures and the chatter of Greek voices dominating the bustling marketplace. They found a modest inn, its courtyard shaded by a large fig tree, its branches heavy with ripening fruit, offering a cool sanctuary from the midday sun. The innkeeper, a stout woman with kind eyes and a ready smile, welcomed them with the typical Macedonian hospitality, offering them simple fare, fresh bread, olives, cheese, and a pitcher of cool wine, which they gratefully accepted, savoring the flavors after their long morning's walk. During their brief stay in Amphipolis, Paul and Silas did not preach openly in the marketplace, choosing instead a more subtle approach, observing the daily rhythms of the town and engaging in quiet conversations with those they encountered, sowing seeds of curiosity rather than outright proclamation. Paul, ever observant, noted the various religious practices evident in the town, the Roman altars, the Greek temples, and the occasional presence of Jewish travelers, understanding that each community required a different approach, a tailored message that could resonate with their specific cultural and spiritual understanding. He reflected on the importance of discernment, of listening more than speaking, of understanding the hearts of the people before attempting to share the profound truths of the gospel, a lesson learned through years of itinerant ministry and countless encounters with diverse populations. Silas, meanwhile, found himself drawn to the quiet contemplation of the river, its steady flow a constant source of calm. He sat by its banks for a time, watching the sunlight dance on the water, reflecting on the journey thus far and the path that lay ahead. He thought of Lydia, the purple cloth dealer from Thyatira, Thyatira, her heart opened by the Lord to receive their message, and her generous hospitality that had provided them with a haven in Philippi. Her faith, so immediate and unwavering, served as a powerful reminder of the transformative power of the gospel, a testament to the fact that God could work through anyone, regardless of their background or social standing, to bring about his divine purposes. He also recalled the other prisoners, their faces a mixture of fear and awe as the earthquake shook their chains loose, and wondered what their reactions had been, if any of them had chosen to embrace the freedom offered not just by the broken chains, but by the message of salvation. The journey from Amphipolis to Apollonia was shorter, a mere 30 miles, and they covered it in the late afternoon, the sun now beginning its slow descent towards the western horizon, casting long, dramatic shadows across the landscape. Apollonia, like Amphipolis, was a smaller, less prominent city compared to the grandeur of Thessalonica, yet it served as another important waypoint on the Aegean Way, a place where travelers could rest and replenish their supplies. They spent another quiet night there, sharing a simple meal with fellow travelers, listening to their stories of trade and travel, gaining further insights into the social and economic fabric of Macedonia, information that Paul meticulously absorbed, understanding its relevance to his mission. Paul, during these quiet evenings, would often engage Silas in discussions about the theological implications of their experiences, delving into the deeper meanings of suffering, deliverance, and the nature of divine intervention. The earthquake, Silas, Paul mused one evening, his voice low and thoughtful, was not merely a physical phenomenon, but a profound spiritual sign, a vivid demonstration of God's power to shatter not just prison walls, but the spiritual chains that bind humanity, opening the way for true freedom. He spoke of the symbolic weight of the prison, representing the captivity of sin and despair, and the earthquake as a divine disruption, a forceful intervention that declared God's sovereignty over all earthly powers and circumstances, a powerful message for a world steeped in idolatry and imperial authority. Silas, always a keen listener, appreciated Paul's ability to articulate the deeper spiritual truths embedded within their daily experiences, transforming ordinary events into profound theological lessons. He contributed his own reflections, often focusing on the human element, the raw emotions he had witnessed, the jailer's despair, his sudden, overwhelming joy, the slave girl's silent suffering, and her eventual liberation. It is in the hearts of individuals, Paul, that the true battle is fought and won, Silas observed, tracing patterns on the dusty table with his finger. The grand narratives of empires and philosophies often overshadow the quiet transformations that occur within a single soul, yet it is these individual conversions that form the bedrock of the kingdom, building it one heart at a time. Their discussions often extended late into the night, their voices hushed, their words weaving through the quiet hum of the inn, a tapestry of shared faith, intellectual curiosity, an unwavering commitment to their divine calling. These moments of intimate conversation were crucial for their spiritual sustenance, allowing them to process the intense experiences they encountered, to reinforce their understanding of their mission, and to strengthen the bond of camaraderie that was essential for navigating the arduous path of apostleship. The shared meals, the quiet reflections, and the deep theological discussions formed a rhythm of spiritual nourishment that sustained them through the physical demands of their journey, preparing them for the challenges that lay ahead. The journey to Thessalonica, a city of immense strategic importance and a thriving commercial hub, was the longest leg of this particular stretch, and as they drew closer, the signs of its grandeur began to emerge. The Aegean Way widened further, becoming even more meticulously maintained, and the traffic increased significantly, with more merchants, soldiers, and travelers heading towards the bustling metropolis. The air grew thicker with the scent of various goods, spices from the east, timber from the Macedonian forests, and the salty tang of the nearby Aegean Sea, all converging on this vibrant port city. The distant site of Thessalonica, spread across the slopes leading down to the Thermaic Gulf, its white buildings gleaming in the sunlight, its harbor bristling with ships, was an impressive spectacle, a testament to its status as a major center of trade and culture in the Roman Empire. As they entered the city, the sheer scale and vibrancy of Thessalonica enveloped them, a stark contrast to the quieter towns they had passed through. The streets teemed with people of diverse origins: Romans, Greeks, Jews, Egyptians, and countless others, all speaking a cacophony of languages, their voices blending into a vibrant, continuous hum. The architecture was grander, with imposing public buildings, ornate temples, and bustling marketplaces overflowing with goods from across the known world. The city, founded in 315 BC by Cassander of Macedon and named after his wife, Thessalonike, a half-sister of Alexander the Great, had flourished under Roman rule, becoming the capital of the Roman province of Macedonia and a free city, enjoying certain privileges that contributed to its prosperity and cosmopolitan character. Paul, ever sensitive to the spiritual pulse of a city, immediately felt the complex interplay of various belief systems and cultural influences that permeated Thessalonica. He knew that this city, with its significant Jewish population and its strong Hellenistic traditions, would present both opportunities and challenges for the propagation of the gospel. His strategy, as always, was to begin in the synagogue, a place where he could find fellow Jews and God-fearing Gentiles who were already familiar with the Scriptures, providing a common ground for discussion and a starting point for introducing the radical new message of Jesus Christ. He understood that establishing a foothold within the Jewish community was often the most effective way to then reach the broader Gentile population, allowing the message to spread organically through existing social networks. They found lodging in a modest house, likely belonging to a Jewish family, a common practice for traveling rabbis and teachers, and after settling in, Paul and Silas made their way to the synagogue on the Sabbath. The synagogue, a simple yet dignified structure, was a sanctuary of quiet contemplation amidst the city's clamor, its interior filled with the hushed murmurs of prayer and the rustling of scrolls. Paul, as was his custom, was invited to speak, and he seized the opportunity, not with fiery rhetoric, but with a reasoned exposition of the Scriptures, carefully explaining how the prophecies of the Old Testament pointed to Jesus as the long-awaited Messiah, the Christ who had suffered, died, and risen again, offering salvation to all who believed. For 3 successive Sabbaths, Paul reasoned with them from the Scriptures, patiently explaining and proving that the Christ had to suffer and rise from the dead, and that this Jesus whom I proclaim to you is the Christ. Some of the Jews were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, along with a large number of God-fearing Greeks and not a few prominent women. These early converts formed the nucleus of the Thessalonian church, a small but fervent community that began to meet in homes, sharing meals, praying together, and eagerly learning more about their new faith. The atmosphere within these nascent gatherings was one of profound joy and spiritual awakening, a sense of belonging that transcended social barriers and cultural differences, uniting them in a shared purpose and a common hope. However, their success also stirred up opposition, as it often did. The Jews who were not persuaded, filled with jealousy, gathered some wicked men from the marketplace, formed a mob, and started a riot in the city. They attacked the house of Jason, where Paul and Silas were staying, hoping to drag them out to the angry crowd. Jason, a prominent member of the Jewish community who had embraced the Christian message and offered his home as a gathering place, became the immediate target of their wrath. The mob, fueled by religious fervor and civic unrest, represented a formidable challenge, threatening to disrupt the fragile peace of the burgeoning Christian community and to undermine the apostles' mission in Thessalonica. When they did not find Paul and Silas, the mob dragged Jason and some other believers before the city officials, shouting, "These men who have caused trouble all over the world have now come here, and Jason has welcomed them into his house. They are all defying Caesar's decrees, saying that there is another king, one called Jesus." This accusation, carefully crafted to appeal to Roman authority, was a grave one, implying sedition against the emperor, a charge that could carry severe penalties, including imprisonment or even death. The city officials, known as politarchs, were naturally alarmed by such accusations, understanding the precarious balance of power in a Roman province and the need to maintain order at all costs, lest they incur the wrath of the imperial government. The politarchs, after hearing the accusations and observing the agitated crowd, took security from Jason and the others, meaning they required a bond or a guarantee that Paul and Silas would leave the city and cause no further disturbance. This was a common Roman legal practice, a way to maintain order without necessarily convicting anyone of a crime, effectively forcing the apostles to depart without directly persecuting them. The decision, though seemingly a setback, was a pragmatic one, allowing Paul and Silas to continue their mission elsewhere, while the fledgling community in Thessalonica, though facing initial persecution, was left to grow and strengthen in their absence, their faith tested but not extinguished. That very night, the believers sent Paul and Silas away to Berea, a city about 50 miles southwest of Thessalonica, nestled in the foothills of Mount Vermion. The departure was swift and clandestine, a necessary measure to avoid further confrontation with the hostile mob and to ensure the safety of the apostles and the nascent Christian community. The journey to Berea, undertaken under the cloak of darkness, was a stark reminder of the constant peril that accompanied their mission, the ever-present threat of opposition and persecution, yet it also underscored the unwavering commitment of the believers who risked their own safety to protect and assist the apostles. As they traveled towards Berea, the night air was cool and still, the stars shining with an intense brilliance in the clear Macedonian sky, their silent vigil a comforting presence above the shadowy landscape. Paul and Silas walked mostly in silence, their minds processing the events of the past few days, the rapid succession of triumphs and trials, the ebb and flow of acceptance and rejection. Paul felt a pang of concern for the young church in Thessalonica, knowing that they would face continued pressure and perhaps even persecution in his absence, yet he also carried a deep conviction that the seeds they had sown were strong and resilient, capable of weathering the impending storms. He knew that the true strength of the gospel lay not in the physical presence of its messengers, but in the indwelling power of the Holy Spirit within the hearts of believers. Silas, ever the steadfast companion, walked beside Paul, his thoughts turning to the character of the Thessalonian converts, their eager receptivity to the message, their genuine desire to understand and live out their new faith. He remembered the faces of those who had gathered in Jason's house, their eyes alight with newfound hope, their voices joining in hymns of praise, a testament to the transformative power of the gospel even in the face of adversity. He felt a quiet pride in their courage, their willingness to embrace a message that often brought with it social ostracization and even physical danger, understanding that such faith was not easily shaken, but rather deepened and refined by the very trials it encountered. The journey to Berea was less arduous than some of their previous travels, the path winding through fertile valleys and past small, tranquil villages, their lights twinkling softly in the distance. They arrived in Berea at dawn, the city gradually awakening to the gentle light of a new day, its streets still quiet, its air fresh and cool. Berea, though smaller than Thessalonica, was known for its intellectual curiosity and its more open-minded populace, a reputation that would soon prove to be a significant advantage for Paul and Silas. The city was nestled in a picturesque setting, surrounded by lush greenery and rolling hills, offering a sense of peace and tranquility after the turbulent events in Thessalonica. Upon arriving in Berea, Paul and Silas, true to their established pattern, immediately went to the Jewish synagogue. The Bereans, unlike some of their counterparts in Thessalonica, were described as being more noble-minded than those in Thessalonica, for they received the message with great eagerness and examined the scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true. This open-mindedness, this willingness to engage with the message critically and to verify it against the sacred texts, was a refreshing change, a testament to their intellectual integrity and their genuine desire for truth. Paul found immense satisfaction in these discussions, in the rigorous examination of the scriptures, knowing that such a foundation would lead to a deeper, more enduring faith. Many of them, therefore, believed, including not a few prominent Greek women and men. The Berean community, characterized by its thoughtful reception of the gospel, grew steadily, attracting individuals from various backgrounds who were drawn to the logical coherence of Paul's arguments and the compelling evidence he presented from the Hebrew Scriptures. The atmosphere in the Berean synagogue was one of respectful inquiry and earnest seeking, a stark contrast to the hostile mobs and jealous opposition they had faced in other cities. This period in Berea was a time of quiet yet profound growth, a testament to the power of reasoned discourse and open-minded investigation in the spread of the gospel. However, the tranquility in Berea was not destined to last indefinitely. When the Jews from Thessalonica learned that Paul was preaching the word of God in Berea, they came there too, agitating the crowds and stirring them up. The persistent opposition from Thessalonica underscored the relentless nature of the spiritual warfare they were engaged in, the determined efforts of those who sought to suppress the spread of the gospel, even pursuing them across considerable distances. The arrival of these agitators disrupted the peaceful atmosphere of Berea, creating tension and potential danger for Paul and Silas, forcing them once again to consider their next steps. The believers in Berea, recognizing the escalating threat, immediately sent Paul away to the coast, while Silas and Timothy remained behind to continue nurturing the nascent church. This strategic decision allowed Paul to escape the immediate danger and continue his mission in new territories, while ensuring that the Berean community, now firmly established, would continue to receive guidance and instruction from Silas and Timothy. The departure of Paul was a bittersweet moment, a necessary separation for the sake of the mission, yet tinged with the sadness of parting from a community that had embraced them with such genuine enthusiasm and open hearts. Paul's journey to the coast was undertaken with a small group of Berean believers who accompanied him, ensuring his safety and providing companionship during the solitary trek. The path wound through picturesque landscapes, descending from the hills towards the shimmering expanse of the Aegean Sea, its deep blue waters stretching endlessly towards the horizon. As they walked, Paul's mind was already turning towards his next destination, the great intellectual and cultural center of Athens, a city renowned for its philosophers, its magnificent architecture, and its deep-rooted traditions of learning and debate. He knew that Athens would present a unique set of challenges, a different kind of intellectual and spiritual landscape compared to the commercial cities of Macedonia, requiring a distinct approach to sharing the gospel. The journey by sea was a time of quiet contemplation for Paul, the rhythmic sway of the ship, the vastness of the ocean, and the endless expanse of the sky providing a backdrop for deep reflection. He thought of the journey thus far, the incredible tapestry of experiences woven together by divine providence, the vision that called him to Macedonia, the conversion of Lydia, the exorcism of the slave girl, the midnight songs in the Philippian prison, the earthquake that shattered chains, the transformation of the jailer, the fervent reception in Berea, and the persistent opposition from Thessalonica. Each event, each encounter, served as a powerful reminder of the dynamic and often unpredictable nature of their mission. Yet through it all, the unwavering hand of God had guided their steps, turning obstacles into opportunities, and suffering into profound spiritual triumph. As the ship sailed closer to the Athenian coast, the iconic silhouette of the Acropolis, crowned by the majestic Parthenon, gradually emerged on the horizon, a breathtaking sight that spoke of centuries of history, philosophy, and artistic endeavor. Athens, the birthplace of democracy and Western philosophy, was a city steeped in intellectual pride and polytheistic worship, its streets adorned with countless idols and altars dedicated to a multitude of gods and goddesses. Paul knew that this city, with its sophisticated thinkers and its deep-seated traditions, would require a nuanced and intellectually rigorous approach, a careful weaving of philosophical discourse with the profound truths of the gospel, challenging their preconceived notions while respecting their intellectual heritage. Upon arrival in Athens, Paul found himself alone for a time, awaiting the arrival of Silas and Timothy, who were to join him later. This period of solitude allowed him to immerse himself in the city's unique atmosphere, to observe its customs, to leave freely to listen to its debates, and to feel the spiritual pulse of this ancient metropolis. He walked through the agora, the bustling marketplace and civic center, observing the daily leave freely of Athenians, listening to the philosophers who gathered there to discuss their ideas, and noting the pervasive presence of idolatry, with statues and altars dedicated to various deities at every turn. His spirit was provoked within him as he saw the city full of idols, a deep spiritual unease stirring within him at the sight of so much intellectual brilliance intertwined with such profound spiritual darkness. He engaged in discussions daily in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Gentiles, and in the marketplace with those who happened to be there, patiently explaining the message of Jesus Christ. He encountered Epicurean and Stoic philosophers, two of the dominant philosophical schools of the time, who debated with him, some mocking him, others intrigued by his new teaching. The Epicureans, who believed in seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, and the Stoics, who emphasized virtue, reason, and living freely in harmony with nature, represented the intellectual elite of Athens, and engaging with them required a deep understanding of their philosophical frameworks and a skillful articulation of the gospel in terms that could resonate with their worldview. One day, they took him to the Areopagus, a prominent hill in Athens that served as a meeting place for the city's highest court and a forum for philosophical discourse, inviting him to explain his new teaching. This was a significant moment, an opportunity to address the intellectual and civic leaders of Athens, to present the gospel in a setting of profound intellectual inquiry. Paul stood before them, not with an aggressive condemnation of their beliefs, but with a respectful yet firm proclamation of the one true God, the creator of all things, the one they unknowingly worshipped as an unknown God. He masterfully used their own cultural context, their altars, and their philosophical ideas as a bridge to introduce the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who had raised Jesus from the dead. Men of Athens, Paul began, his voice resonating with quiet authority, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I am going to proclaim to you. He then proceeded to articulate a profound theological argument, speaking of God as the creator of the universe, who does not live in temples made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands, as if he needed anything, because he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. He challenged their anthropocentric view of the divine, asserting God's transcendence and his immanent presence in all creation, a concept that would have resonated with some of the Stoic thinkers present. He spoke of God's universal sovereignty, that from one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, Paul declared, quoting one of their own poets, a brilliant rhetorical move that established common ground and demonstrated his familiarity with their intellectual traditions. He then moved towards the climax of his message, the call to repentance and the proclamation of the resurrection, a concept that would prove to be the most challenging for the Greek philosophers to accept. Therefore God has overlooked such times of ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. The mention of the resurrection, a concept utterly foreign to Greek philosophy, which often viewed the body as a prison for the soul, immediately caused a stir among his listeners. Some sneered, others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." But a few believed, among them Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. Paul's time in Athens, though not yielding the same mass conversions as in some other cities, was nonetheless significant, establishing a small but influential group of believers within the intellectual heart of the Roman world. It demonstrated his adaptability, his ability to engage with diverse audiences, and his unwavering commitment to proclaiming the gospel, even in the most challenging of intellectual environments. The seeds sown in Athens, though few, were planted in fertile ground, among individuals who possessed the intellectual capacity to grapple with the profound truths of the Christian message and to articulate it within their own cultural context, ensuring its continued spread. After Athens, Paul journeyed to Corinth, a bustling port city known for its wealth, its strategic location, and its notorious immorality. Corinth, situated on the Isthmus of Corinth, controlled trade routes between the Aegean and Adriatic seas, making it a melting pot of cultures, religions, and vices. This city, with its vibrant commercial life and its pervasive paganism, presented a new set of challenges and opportunities for Paul's mission, a place where the message of Christ would confront the stark realities of a deeply secular and morally complex society. He knew that in Corinth, the spiritual battle would be particularly intense, requiring immense spiritual fortitude and unwavering faith. Upon arriving in Corinth, Paul met Aquila and Priscilla, a Jewish couple who had recently come from Italy because Claudius had ordered all Jews to leave Rome. They were tent makers by trade, and because Paul shared their profession, he stayed and worked with them. This encounter was a providential one, providing Paul with not only lodging and employment but also with faithful companions and fellow laborers in the gospel, a much-needed source of encouragement and support in the challenging environment of Corinth. The shared craft of tent-making allowed them to spend countless hours together, discussing the scriptures, planning their evangelistic efforts, and building a deep bond of friendship and spiritual partnership. Every Sabbath, Paul would go to the synagogue and reason with both Jews and Greeks, trying to persuade them about Jesus. He continued his pattern of starting with the Jewish community, seeking to establish common ground through the scriptures, and then extending his message to the God-fearing Gentiles who frequented the synagogue. However, as was often the case, when the Jews opposed Paul and became abusive, he shook out his clothes in protest and said to them, "Your blood be on your own heads. I am innocent of it. From now on I will go to the Gentiles." This symbolic act marked a decisive turning point in his ministry in Corinth, shifting his primary focus from the synagogue to the broader Gentile population, a decision driven by the persistent rejection he faced from some within the Jewish community. He then moved next door to the house of Titius Justus, a Gentile who was a worshipper of God, whose house was conveniently located next to the synagogue, providing a visible and accessible alternative for those interested in the Christian message. Crispus, the synagogue leader, and his entire household believed in the Lord, and many of the Corinthians who heard Paul believed and were baptized. The conversion of Crispus, a prominent figure in the Jewish community, was a significant victory, demonstrating that even those deeply entrenched in traditional Judaism could embrace the radical new message of Christ, and his conversion undoubtedly influenced many others to consider Paul's teachings. One night, the Lord spoke to Paul in a vision, "Do not be afraid, keep on speaking, do not be silent. For I am with you, and no one is going to attack and harm you, because I have many people in this city." This divine reassurance was a powerful affirmation for Paul, strengthening his resolve and encouraging him to persevere in the face of opposition and the pervasive immorality of Corinth. The vision underscored the sovereign hand of God at work, preparing hearts and opening doors, even in the most unlikely of places, reminding Paul that his efforts were not in vain, and that a harvest of souls awaited him in this complex and challenging city. Paul stayed in Corinth for 1.5 years, teaching the Word of God among them, a significant period of sustained ministry that allowed him to establish a strong and vibrant church in the city. During this time, Silas and Timothy rejoined him from Macedonia, bringing with them encouraging reports from the churches in Thessalonica and Berea, news that undoubtedly brought great joy and renewed vigor to Paul's spirit. Their reunion marked a period of intense and fruitful ministry, as the three men worked together, teaching, preaching, and nurturing the growing community of believers in Corinth, laying a solid foundation for the future of the church in this vital Roman city. The church in Corinth, though facing its own unique challenges related to the city's pervasive immorality and internal divisions, grew into a significant center of Christian faith, a testament to Paul's tireless efforts and the power of the Holy Spirit at work. The letters Paul would later write to the Corinthians would address these very issues, providing guidance and instruction on matters of doctrine, ethics, and church order, demonstrating his ongoing pastoral concern for the communities he had established. The journey from Philippi through Amphipolis, Apollonia, Thessalonica, Berea, and Athens, culminating in this extended stay in Corinth, represented a monumental chapter in the spread of the gospel, a testament to the unwavering faith, resilience, and strategic vision of Paul and his companions. As Paul, Silas, and Timothy continued their ministry in Corinth, the echoes of their midnight songs in the Philippian prison, the earthquake that had shattered chains, and the jailer who found faith, reverberated not just in their memories, but in the growing communities of believers across Macedonia and Achaia. Each new convert, each new church established, was a living testament to the enduring power of a faith that could transcend geographical boundaries, cultural differences, and the most formidable of human obstacles, transforming lives and reshaping the spiritual landscape of the ancient world. The vast Roman Empire, with its intricate network of roads and sea lanes, its diverse populations and its complex social structures, was slowly, inexorably, being permeated by the quiet, yet revolutionary, message of a crucified and resurrected Messiah, a message carried by a small band of courageous apostles, whose unwavering resolve and profound trust in divine providence continued to illuminate the path forward, leaving behind a world slowly, beautifully, settling into a profound and peaceful stillness. The story settles now, like dust after a long journey. Thank you for listening. If you find peace here, we would love to have you back. Tap subscribe so the next story finds you. Until then, sleep deeply and wake rested.